Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sidney Powell. Brenda Powell was born in 1969 in Saline, Agua, USA. She graduated from high school and then attended Akron University. After completing her studies, she began working as a pediatrician in the oncology department of her local children's hospital. For over 28 years, she has dedicated herself to helping sick children. Brenda oversees inpatient care and is known to her peers and hospital staff as a calm, quiet person who is exceptionally kind to both patients and their parents. In November 1996, Brenda, 27, married Stephen Powell and took his last name. They were introduced through a mutual friend who worked with her at the hospital. The couple enjoyed a happy life together for 23 years and welcomed 2 children. A daughter named Sydney and a son named Andrew. Since childhood, Sydney has been passionate about sports, especially football. Her family watched football together every Sunday, which helped strengthen their relationship. They also regularly visited the beach and Disneyland. As Sydney grew older, she and her mother, Brenda, began to spend more time together. While her father and brother watched football, they enjoyed shopping, which further strengthened their relationship. Sydney did well in high school, which helped her pass her exams and gain admission to Mount Union University, where she also received a scholarship. In college, she became friends with Lauren and a group of female students while living on campus. She participated in school events and was introduced to many different activities. Friends described Sydney as friendly and easygoing. Sydney's academic journey took an unexpected turn after her first year. Initially, everything seemed fine. She excelled in her classes and was praised by her teachers, ranking among the top students. Sydney began working part-time during the summer holidays to earn extra money. However, during her second year, Sydney faced significant challenges and decided to move off campus. Her friends were initially confused by this sudden decision, but later learned that Sydney was struggling academically. Her grades were dropping. Additionally, Sydney began sleeping excessively, often around 16 hours a day. Sydney's friends thought she could handle it all because she was a smart and hardworking student who had previously done well in school. Unfortunately, Sydney struggled and ended up failing 3 out of 4 exams. Due to strict regulations, she received a notice of expulsion from the university, which shocked everyone. Sydney was worried and shared her concerns with her friends. Fortunately, they informed her that she could reapply for admission. At the beginning of 2020, Sydney resumed her studies, attending classes and sorority meetings. She happily told her friends that she had been readmitted to the university and was doing well. In early February, Sydney was notified that she had to leave the school permanently and that her expulsion would remain in effect. She was offered assistance with moving and packing, and the school planned to notify her parents of her situation to help cover her expenses. However, Sydney told the school administration that her family already knew and did not need to be contacted. This was not true, and she was afraid that her parents would find out about her expulsion. During this time, she told her parents that she was doing well in school and had good grades, and that she had even won a scholarship. Her parents trusted her and had no reason to doubt her. After being evicted from campus, Sydney left but did not return home before the end of February. Instead, she stayed with friends in various hotels, paying in cash to avoid being tracked and to keep her situation at the university a secret. Although she worked part-time to support herself, her earnings were insufficient. Sydney constantly searched for online opportunities to make money but could not find a full-time job that would provide adequate support. She continued to live in hotels or with friends, afraid to go home. She cut back on everything and often did not eat enough. Eventually, she decided to return home, claiming that the campus was closed for renovations. She told her parents that she would stay with them while she went to college and still work. Her parents believed her and thought everything was fine. Sydney has been lying to her mother by saying that she is fine. Recently, Brenda has noticed some strange changes in her daughter's behavior. She discovers that Sydney is spending more time at home and not going to school, which raises concerns. This information later comes to light because Sydney's entire family uses the Life 360 app, a mobile phone location tracking app on a map for safety, allowing family members to know where each other are. On February 25, 2020, Brenda received a notification from the app that Sydney had stayed home all day instead of coming to college as scheduled. This worried Brenda, who was concerned that something was wrong. She contacted her daughter to find out what was going on. Sydney replied that she had a week off because her teacher was absent. She mentioned that students were given assignments to complete at home and were participating in remote learning. However, Brenda began to doubt Sydney's story. She told her daughter that her explanations did not seem right and reminded her of the importance of good grades to maintain her scholarship and graduate, which would affect her future job opportunities. She also emphasized the importance of attending school regularly. Sydney then reassured her mother that everything was fine and that she should not worry. The deception continued. On March 2nd, Sydney texted her mother, saying she was going to school and would be back by 2:30 p.m. Instead, she spent time with a friend, watching TV, while lying about her college situation. During this time, the parents noticed that something was wrong. Their daughter did not receive the scholarship, so her father, Stephen, had to pay her tuition. He tried to send money through the payment gateway, but could not complete the transaction because he had lost access to his account. Initially, he suspected a technical problem and decided to wait. However, when Stephen logged in on March 3rd while working at a metallurgical plant, he was still unable to complete the transaction. He then asked his daughter about the problem. Sydney reassured him not to worry and promised that she would look into the matter and resolve it. Stephen realized he could not delay any longer as the deadline was near, and he needed to pay for his daughter's studies quickly. He decided to contact the university himself to resolve the situation. When he called, the staff checked their records and informed him that Sydney was not listed as a student, meaning her access had been revoked. Stephen was shocked and thought there must be some mistake. He requested they verify the information again, and they confirmed that Sydney had indeed been expelled. However, the university staff would not disclose the date of her expulsion, citing confidentiality rules. Stephen used a tracking app to locate Sydney, who was supposed to be in class. Instead, he discovered she was at home while he was at work. He wanted to go home to talk to her, but he feared she might track his movements and run away. To avoid this, he left his phone at work and headed home. Before leaving, he called Sydney to gather information, but she avoided giving clear answers. During the conversation, she admitted that she was struggling at university and didn't like it there. However, she continued to lie, not confessing that she had been expelled a long time ago. Instead, she claimed she had just not been attending classes. Stephen was troubled by his daughter's situation. He believed she was capable and had a bright future ahead, but he worried that her lack of commitment to attending classes could hinder her progress. He wanted to talk to her about the issue so they could find a solution together. On his way to work, Stephen called Brenda to inform her about their daughter's learning difficulties. Although Brenda suspected something was wrong, she hoped it was not true. Throughout the call, Stephen was concerned about Sydney's situation. However, Brenda reassured him. With a background in psychology, she had a skill for helping others and wanted to use her experience to support their daughter. She promised Stephen that she would take time off work, go home, and have a calm and open discussion with Sydney to ensure that they could all make the best decision together. Brenda then tried to contact the school but was unsuccessful. She left a voicemail asking for a call back and then went home. When Brenda reached her private entrance, she told her husband what had happened and went inside. Meanwhile, teachers Michelle and John received Brenda's message and called her back within the hour. At approximately 12:36 p.m., Brenda answered the phone and spoke calmly to the teachers. Everything seemed normal until Brenda started screaming into the phone, followed by a series of noises. Michelle and John, who were listening on speakerphone, were confused about what was happening but sensed that something was wrong. Michelle and John were worried about what had happened and tried calling Brenda again, but she did not answer. After several tries, a woman finally picked up at 12:40 p.m., but it wasn't Brenda. The teachers recognized Sydney's voice and asked to speak to her mother, but the call suddenly ended. This situation made Michelle and John suspicious. They decided to contact the local police to check on Brenda. Police officer Kenneth Diss, a friend of Brenda's family, heard the call and was extremely concerned about the alarming situation. He personally called Stephen to ask what was going on at their house, but Stephen could not provide any information because he was not home. After thinking for a moment, Stephen recalled that Sydney and Brenda were supposed to be at home discussing their study problems. He suspected there might have been a conflict between his wife and daughter. But he couldn't imagine the reality of the situation. Stephen then rushed home and called his daughter, Sydney, to find out what was going on. Sydney reassures him that everything is fine and the atmosphere seems calm. However, when Stephen tells her that the police are on their way, Sydney suddenly becomes hysterical. She begins to cry and reveals that a robber has broken into the house and attacked them. The call then ends abruptly. The police had already arrived at the house when Sydney dashed out, covered in blood, and screaming. She told the officers a shocking story about a robber who had broken in and attacked her mother. She said she heard glass breaking and that her mother told her to run, so she did. Sydney then hid in a courtyard, anxiously listening. She then found her mother lying in a pool of blood and she tried to help her, which is how she got blood on her. Inside the house, officers found Brenda lying face up in a room. She was badly injured, with a bloody cast iron skillet nearby and a kitchen knife on the floor. Despite the broken glass, officers began to doubt Sydney's story. Her story about a robber seemed very unbelievable. An ambulance arrived quickly and took Brenda to hospital, where she was taken to the intensive care unit. Sadly, 50-year-old Brenda Powell died shortly after arriving. Sydney was also examined by paramedics, but no serious injuries were found. She was sedated, her cuts were bandaged, and she was sent home. Forensic experts who examined Brenda's body were shocked by the brutality of the attack. She had suffered a severe blow to the back of the head, which caused her scalp to detach from her skull. Additionally, she had numerous stab wounds, estimated to be between 20 and 30, mostly concentrated on her neck. There were also multiple bruises and cuts on her arms, suggesting she had tried to defend herself. A preliminary review of the situation led police to believe that Sydney's account of events was fabricated. Although Sydney was covered in blood and had several smaller cuts on her arms, they were significantly less severe than her mother's injuries. It was evident that the robbery had been staged, as nothing was taken from the house. Sydney's actions raised several questions. After her mother told her to leave the house, why didn't she run to the neighbors for help or call 911? Instead, she waited in the yard and later went back into the house without any apparent fear. None of the neighbors reported seeing a robber. The blood found on Sydney was tested and matched her mother's, including traces on the broken glass. Police sent the knife, believed to be the murder weapon, and the frying pan for analysis. Brenda's blood was found on these items, and no fingerprints or other DNA were found at the scene. It appears that Sydney injured herself when she stabbed her mother. Sydney Powell was then taken to the police station for questioning. After the initial panic subsided, she refused to answer any questions. By this time, police investigating the attack had learned about recent events in Sydney's university life. They discovered that she had been expelled a month earlier and had lied to her family about her situation, staying with friends in hotels instead. She was so afraid of disappointing those around her that she had lied not only to her parents but also to her classmates and others. Police believed that Sydney was so afraid of telling the truth that she decided to kill her mother when her mother started to suspect something was wrong. Despite this, Sydney chose to remain silent. 19-year-old Sydney Powell was arrested and charged with murdering Brenda. She also faced charges for causing serious injury and for tampering with evidence to mislead the investigation. Due to her mental health issues, she was unable to admit or deny her guilt. Her lawyer argued that she was insane, stating that Sydney had struggled with serious mental health problems since childhood. At the time of the offense, Sydney may have been experiencing a mental health crisis that affected her perception of her actions. Sydney faced several mental health issues that may have contributed to the violent incident, which led police to request a psychiatric evaluation. During the examination, Sydney spoke about her memories of that day but could only recall bits and pieces. She remembered sitting in the basement, anxious about her parents coming home after her father found out about her struggles. She also remembers her mother coming home and their conversation starting, when her mother comforted her and asked what happened at school. She wished her mother would leave her alone. Then she heard the sound of glass breaking, and then she couldn't remember anything else about what happened. Sydney informed her doctor that she had been experiencing hallucinations since she was 11 years old. She had always been very anxious, responsible, and self-critical, setting extremely high academic standards for herself. At times her anxiety became so intense that it affected her ability to concentrate on tests, leading to multiple psychological evaluations. After extensive evaluation and discussion with Sydney, the psychiatrist diagnosed her with acute post-traumatic stress disorder, schizoaffective disorder, and depression. Sydney reported that she had recurring nightmares of her mother covered in blood. The lack of a clear motive for the murder led the psychiatrist to determine that Sydney was insane at the time of the incident. Another doctor who worked with Sydney for at least 3 to 6 months before the crime noted that her mental health had deteriorated significantly. She started losing touch with reality and began failing her exams, which ultimately led to her expulsion from university. Her condition was worsened by extreme self-criticism. She couldn't accept that she had failed. Sydney was also afraid to confess her struggles to her parents. However, the truth eventually came out, causing her immense stress. This culminated in a psychotic breakdown that resulted in her mother's murder. After her arrest, Sydney's bail was initially set at $250,000 but was later raised to $500,000. One of her relatives posted bail, allowing her to await her trial outside of custody. During this time, she received treatment for her mental health issues and felt significantly better by the time the hearings began. Sydney eventually regained her composure. After Sydney saw Brenda talking to college teachers, she knew that her mother would soon hear the truth from them. In a psychotic state, she attacked her mother. Teachers at the college heard the beginning of the attack. During the trial, her friends and relatives confirmed that they did not notice any significant changes in her behavior leading up to the crime. Although she was upset about being expelled, she was generally cheerful and sociable. The only noticeable difference was that she began sleeping more. The defense acknowledged that Sydney killed her mother but maintained that she was insane at the time. However, many experts disagreed with the psychiatrist's diagnosis. What everyone agreed on was that she suffered from borderline personality disorder, which is characterized by stubbornness, mood swings, and self-destructive behavior. In addition, signs of hallucinations were reported by Sydney to a psychiatrist when she was 11. There was no evidence in the medical records to support Sydney's claims, which undermined the defense's strategy. Several former friends mentioned that Sydney had exhibited unusual behavior even during her school years. One teacher recalled when Sydney was so nervous that she couldn't read anything on a test. However, teacher didn't realize that Sydney's anxiety could indicate mental health issues, so teacher didn't tell anyone. This type of anxiety continued into college, which may have contributed to Sydney failing her exams and eventually being expelled. While awaiting trial, Sydney lived with her grandmother and was prescribed medication to treat her mental health issues. The medication list and dosage were changed several times to find the most effective combination. Sydney's health improved significantly, and she shared any positive changes with her doctor. Her father also noticed the improvement and admitted that Sydney had a strong bond with her mother and loved her deeply. He believed that if Sydney had been in a healthy state of mind, she would never have harmed her mother. Throughout the trial, Sydney cried continuously and she expressed remorse for her actions. On September 18, 2023, the jury deliberated. Sydney Powell was found guilty on all counts. Sydney was sentenced to life in prison but will be eligible for parole after 15 years. Sydney and her attorney were unhappy with the sentence and planned to appeal the court's decision. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ellen Greenberg. Ellen Greenberg was born in New York on June 23, 1993, as the only child of Joshua and Sandy Greenberg. At the time of the events, she was 27 years old and living in Philadelphia. Ellen grew up in a family filled with love and was a cheerful, outgoing girl. In high school, she played softball and golf, excelling as a competitive athlete. She was well-liked and had many friends. Her mother said that she was a special person, able to connect people with each other. After graduating from college, Ellen earned a degree in communications from the University of Pennsylvania. Even so, she felt this was not her true passion. As a result, she took evening classes at the university and eventually earned a teaching degree. After completing her studies, she quickly found a job as a first-grade teacher in Philadelphia. In 2008, Ellen met Samuel Goldberg, the son of a famous family in the area. They started dating soon after. Deeply in love, they soon decided to live together. By 2011, they were engaged and planning to marry in August. Ellen was thrilled and joyfully prepared for the wedding, trying on her dress and sending out invitations. She had no idea that incident would soon take a strange and unexpected turn. On January 26, 2011, while Ellen was at work, Philadelphia had a major snowstorm, prompting the school to close early. Ellen returned to the apartment she shared with her fiancé, Samuel. At around 5 p.m., Samuel went to the gym, he unaware it would be the last time he saw Ellen alive. When he returned at 5:45 p.m., he found the apartment door locked from the inside. He knocked repeatedly, called Ellen's name, phoned her multiple times, and sent 9 text messages, but received no response. Then, he asked the security guard for help to break down the door, but the guard refused, citing rules against leaving post. Determined, he broke down the door himself. Inside, he discovered a horrific scene. Ellen was sitting on the kitchen floor, leaning against the cabinets, with multiple wounds. He immediately called 911. The operator instructed him to check if Ellen was breathing and to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation. However, he noticed a knife stuck in her chest, preventing him from starting resuscitation. Tragically, Ellen had already passed away. When the police arrived to inspect the scene, they found that the apartment's entrance had not been forced, and inside, everything appeared to be in order, with no signs of a struggle. The door was locked from the inside, and the latch was secured in the usual way until Samuel broke it down, making it unlikely that an intruder had entered. The police also observed that Ellen's hands had no defensive wounds. Despite her multiple injuries, it seemed improbable that she had inflicted them on herself. Nevertheless, waiting for the forensic examination results, the police concluded that Ellen had ended her life, even though there was no note explaining her actions. Additionally, there were fruits on the kitchen table, indicating that Ellen might have been planning to make a fruit salad when she supposedly decided to end her life. The police took Samuel to the station to provide testimony. By this time, Ellen's parents had received the sad news over the phone. They lived in Harrisburg, a 2-hour drive away. When they learned that their only daughter had passed away, they completely collapsed. The very next day, information about Ellen's death has changed. The autopsy revealed she had 20 wounds, 10 on the front and 10 on the neck from the back. Medical examiners emphasized that these injuries showed that this was a murder. She also had bruises on various parts of her body, both recent and older, making it hard to believe she could inflict neck and head wounds on herself from behind. Especially because at least 2 of these wounds were almost fatal and left her unconscious. Additionally, it takes a great deal of force to cause these injuries, especially head injuries. She was found with a knife stuck in her chest after already sustaining 19 injuries. Could she have done all of this by herself? Despite the evidence that has been found, the police disagreed with autopsy officers' conclusion. Authorities announced that Ellen ended her life. They came to this conclusion because they found no signs of anyone else being there. The door was locked from the inside and the neighbors heard no strange sounds, only Samuel's screams. Additionally, DNA analysis of the knife revealed only Ellen's fingerprints. The bruises on her were explained by the police as injuries from playing sports, even though she had not participated in any sports for several years. Doctors also checked Ellen's mental health and learned from her parents that recently, she has been dealing with anxiety. She had been prescribed 2 medications, both known to have side effects that may cause negative thoughts or behaviors. However, her psychiatrist, Len, stated that she showed no signs of end-her-life thoughts. 2 weeks before the incident, when they met, she seemed fine. In addition, the psychiatrist said had never heard Ellen say that anyone had treated her cruelly. Her family also confirmed this. They described Ellen as a good-natured and cheerful. Her loved ones couldn't believe she would harm herself, as she was happy, preparing for her upcoming wedding, and had even tried on her dress and sent out invitations just days before the incident. Ellen's mother and friends admit that she has been feeling anxious and stressed due to work and wedding preparations. However, they consider this to be normal. The thought that she would harm herself just before her wedding was completely out of character. There was a conflict between the forensic medical examination, which ruled it as murder, and the police, who believed Ellen harmed herself. To resolve this, the doctor decided to send a sample from Ellen's spine to a neurologist at the Forensic Medical Examination Bureau. This was to verify the cause of death. Because if one of her severe neck wounds had penetrated deep enough to reach the spinal cord, causing paralysis, she wouldn't have been able to inflict further wounds. This indicated that someone else was responsible for Ellen's death. 3 months after the incident, the medical examiner retracted his murder hypothesis, suggesting instead that Ellen's neck wounds were not severe enough to cause paralysis and that she could have inflicted them on herself. Ellen's parents were not given a clear explanation for this change in the investigation's direction. They described Ellen as squeamish, noting that she avoided even piercing her ears a second time due to her low pain tolerance, making it hard for them to believe she could harm herself. Despite this, the authorities closed the case. Refusing to accept this decision, Ellen's family decided to pursue their own investigation. They hired top experts, including forensic specialists Kirill Klin and Henry Lee, to consider the evidence and the autopsy report. These experts cast doubt on the police investigation report that Ellen did this to herself. In 2012, Henry noted that the likelihood of murder Ellen is significant. Forensic pathologist Cyril Wecht pointed out that statistically, women rarely use sharp objects to end her life and seldom harm themselves through clothing. On the other hand, Bren, a seasoned detective, investigated Ellen's death. After reviewing the footage, Bren claimed to notice that the bloodstains did not match the position in which Ellen was found, as she was sitting and leaning against the kitchen cabinets. However, there was a trail of blood running horizontally from her nose to her ear, and the blood splatter on her shoes indicated that she was standing when she suffered the injuries. All of this led he to assume that the scene of the incident and the position of the body had been altered. Although Ellen's parents tried, the lawyer failed to change the version of incident, as it would have been necessary to present more compelling evidence. Therefore, the case did not progress and remained unchanged until 2015. Andre, an assistant attorney, did not officially take on the case. However, he was intrigued by the unusual circumstances and decided to review the file to understand what drove Ellen to her actions. Ellen's fiancé, Samuel, found her, and he told the police that the door was locked from the inside, which forced him to kick it open. Andre noted in a photograph from the scene that the lock was a simple hotel-style latch. This type of latch can be locked from both the inside and the outside by turning a screw. An analyst mentioned that this kind of latch typically cannot be broken by a kick without dislodging the door from its frame. Yet, the only damage observed on the door was a missing screw. Additionally, the police considered the fact that Ellen had no defensive wounds. It was unclear in which order her injuries occurred, but the final one was undoubtedly to the heart, where the knife was found. If one of the neck wounds had damaged her bone marrow, she would not have had any opportunity to defend herself. One of Ellen's head wounds, which indicated she was attacked from behind, caught Andre's attention. He raised these concerns with the forensic expert, who said a neurologist had examined Ellen and found no injury. He then asked for an official report to confirm there was no spinal injury, only to be told that no such report existed, it had been lost, suggesting it was more of a rumor that no one had substantiated. At the time, there was no neurologist in the Forensic Medical Examination Bureau, so Dr. Adams was brought in. She allegedly examined Ellen's spine and found no damage. However, it later emerged that no record existed of Dr. Adams being asked to perform this examination. In a 2018 interview, Dr. Adams claims that she did not examine Ellen's spine. Following this, Andre contacted a private investigator for the Greenberg family and recommended hiring a private neurologist. He discovered that Ellen's spine sample was still held at the Forensic Bureau, which seemed unnecessary. The family took this advice and hired Dr. Ross. He concluded in a report that Ellen's spinal cord was damaged by 2 severe wounds on her neck, making it impossible for her to inflict further injuries on herself. At the same time, Andre realized that the data the police had was provided by Samuel, Ellen's fiancé, who was at the scene. This was the only account of what happened in the apartment. Samuel said he had not been with Ellen for 45 minutes, and when he returned, he couldn't open the door. Neighbors said they heard Samuel screaming and calling Ellen's name through the door. Samuel said he became worried and started calling Ellen on the phone, sending her 9 text messages. When he got no response, he went downstairs to ask the building security guard if had any tools to open the door, but the guard refused to help. Later, Samuel claimed he went downstairs several more times, trying to persuade the guard to help him break down the door. In his official statement to the police, he said the guard was with him when he kicked the door open and entered. However, the guard told both the police and Ellen's family that he never left his post and did not accompany Samuel into the apartment. Additionally, the guard noted that Samuel, who claimed to have been at the gym, was wearing boots instead of sneakers. On the other hand, Samuel called 911 at 6:33 p.m., which means that an hour had already passed since he returned to the apartment and attempted to contact Ellen. This is very strange when analyzed. Let's think, he goes to the gym for half an hour. Later, when he returned home, he called Ellen to open the door, but she did not answer him. He shouts her name, tries to call her on the phone and sends her 9 text messages. How long should it take to realize that something is wrong? 10 to 20, maybe 30 minutes, but not an hour. Another strange thing that Andre discovered is that Samuel, before calling 911, made 2 calls, one to his parents and another to his uncle, who is a lawyer. Moreover, they arrived at the scene before the emergency services, and it was Samuel's parents who informed Ellen's parents about what happened. One thing is clear, no one would react in the same way as Samuel. Anyone would ask for help as soon as possible to try to save the life of the person they love, right? Andre listened to Samuel's call to 911, and he was surprised to hear Samuel speak in a calm tone. Even as Samuel said things like my God, his fiancée, there is blood, his voice remained steady. When the emergency services worker asked him to describe the situation, he ignored the request and instead talked about his trip to the gym and his return home. When they instructed him to perform CPR, Samuel asked, "Does he really need to do this?" After spending 2 or 3 minutes supposedly performing CPR, he suddenly told them that he had just found a knife stuck in Ellen's chest. Remarkably, although he was beside her the whole time, but before that he had not seen it. This was no small tool, but a 10-inch long meat cleaver. It was clearly visible. After discovering it, he told them that Ellen must have fallen on the knife. Following this, Samuel was taken to the police station to give a statement. He did so only in the presence of his lawyer and provided a very brief statement. After that, he refused to speak to detectives again, despite their repeated attempts to question him. It seemed there was no way to get him to talk. These things made Ellen's family believe that she was murdered. A neurologist hired by Ellen's family discovered a bone marrow perforation and also found signs of strangulation and bruising. However, many researchers reviewed the footage at the scene and were surprised to see only a small amount of blood. Ellen had 20 injuries, which raised suspicions that the crime scene may have been tampered with. However, the investigation did not conduct any crucial tests. The police did not even examine the trash after arriving at the scene. They simply observed and assumed she had died naturally, and without protecting the scene. Additionally, the day after this tragic incident, Samuel's uncle, cousin, and brother visited the apartment, supposedly to retrieve a suit. They took Samuel's laptop, Ellen's laptop, and her cell phone. The police only seized these items on January 29, 3 days later. Upon examination, the laptops showed search queries about ending one's life. Yet, the official report filed in April 2011 did not mention these searches. Ellen's parents and friends slightly changed their views about Samuel after the incident. They never labeled he as a suspect or culprit, but they did have doubts. They realized they had noticed changes in Ellen's behavior weeks before the incident but didn't think much of it at the time. Her friends observed that she started consulting Samuel on every decision, which was unusual for her. Ellen, once a happy girl, had become worried and insecure. One day, she told her parents she wanted to quit her job and move back home. She assuring them it had nothing to do with Samuel and she was fine. Her parents told her she could come home whenever she needed and advised her to seek help for her anxiety. In 2019, Deputy Coroner and Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences Gregory McDonald presented a report supporting the police's version of incident. He stated that Ellen had inflicted superficial wounds on herself, as people often start with shallow cuts before going deeper. However, the deep wounds and marks that looked like signs of an attack also made him suspicious. After the incident, Samuel continued to contact the Greenberg family for a year, but their relationship eventually faded. He later sent them an email announcing his wedding. Today, he is married, has 2 children and lives a normal life, completely unrelated to the Greenberg family. The Greenberg family and their attorney have filed a lawsuit against the medical examiner who performed the autopsy and the Philadelphia County Coroner's Office to change and explain why the case was closed. In May 2020, a Philadelphia court finally supported their claim. The family hopes to receive the case file, which they were previously denied access to. There is also a CCTV video from the building. It does not show anything unusual, it only confirms the time Samuel left and returned to the apartment. They also asked to see the 911 call recording. These procedures were delayed, and the trial was rescheduled for 2021. If they win, the case will be reclassified and investigated as a murder. However, due to the time that has passed and the investigation's shortcomings, many clues have been lost forever, such as the luminol test. The Pennsylvania Attorney General's office closed the case in July 2022. The case has been transferred to the Chester County District Attorney's Office, which has assigned new investigators and a prosecutor to take over. This change was supported by Ellen's parents. They have always maintained that their daughter did not end her life. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Stephanie Ruggeberg. This incident occurred in 2002 and involved 15-year-old Stephanie Ruggeberg. She had an older brother and was born in Lüdenscheid, Germany. In 2002, her mother, Sylvia, decided to move to Spain for the summer, specifically to the Balearic Islands. Sylvia had planned to start a new phase in her life after divorcing the father of her children, believing the island would be a great place to rethink things. Sylvia had begun a relationship with a man named Peter. Before moving to her new home, Sylvia left her two teenage children, Stephanie and her brother, in Germany with their grandparents. She came to the island first to find an apartment and prepare for the move in the summer. To help with this, she found a temporary job as a manager at a 5-star hotel on the island, working there during the day. Meanwhile, Stephanie and her brother were excited about the holiday and began packing their belongings. On the first day of the summer holidays, Stephanie and her brother went to Mallorca, where their mother, Sylvia, planned to stay for the summer and return in September. She rented an apartment and moved in with Peter and his children. For 15-year-old Stephanie, this was a momentous event. She was eager to embrace life in Mallorca, especially the nightlife, which suited her age and personality. She loved going to parties, quickly making friends with other young people on the island, and often stayed out late, sometimes not coming home for days. She was often seen in bars and clubs, usually with other girls and sometimes with boys. Sylvia was very upset about the situation. Every time Stephanie returned from late-night parties, Sylvia would worry about her daughter, leading to conflict between them. This tension also affected Peter, who often tried to ease Sylvia's worries. Instead of enjoying their time together, Peter felt the need to address Stephanie's behavior in order to restore peace in the family. At the age of 15, Stephanie faced a difficult choice. She wanted to enjoy her time with her friends on the island, but she also felt pressured to listen to her mother. Although Stephanie understood that her actions were causing her family pain, Sylvia tried to convey her concerns to Stephanie. This caused a temporary strain in their relationship, and Stephanie felt hurt for a few days. Eventually, she realized that her family cared about her and her safety. After a few days, Stephanie began to feel better, and it seemed that her family was mending their relationship. However, Stephanie wanted to enjoy her time off with her friends. Since the summer holidays were coming to an end and she was going back to Germany to go back to school, Stephanie asked to spend more time with her friends during the holidays. In return, she promised to be more responsible and come home on time, respecting her mother's rules. After a few discussions, Sylvia finally believed her daughter's reasoning. On July 31, 2002, Stephanie asked her mother again if she could go out with friends. The conversation about school quickly reassured Sylvia. Moreover, Stephanie had been acting responsibly for the past week. Eventually, she went out to enjoy herself, promising to be home before midnight. Her family decided not to wait for her and went to bed, hoping she would honor her promise this time. Waking up early, Sylvia stepped out of her bedroom and noticed Stephanie's bag carelessly left on the hallway floor. Sylvia immediately suspected that her daughter had come home late and was a bit tipsy, leading her to toss her things aside and head straight to her room. Sylvia intended to take the bag to Stephanie's room and check on her. However, when she entered, Sylvia was surprised to find it empty. It turned out that Peter had woken up before Sylvia but hadn't seen Stephanie. Now, Sylvia was concerned because she had no idea where her daughter was, and the family began to feel anxious. Stephanie had a history of frequent partying and coming home late. Stephanie would even stay with friends or spend the night at parties, sometimes not returning for days. Worried that her daughter had fallen back into these old habits, Sylvia planned to confront Stephanie when she returned home. However, as the days passed and Stephanie still hadn't returned home, Sylvia's worry turned to fear and panic. After a week of searching for her daughter on her own, she decided to contact the police. During that time, she contacted all of Stephanie's friends she knew, visited their homes, and spoke to their parents. Unfortunately, no one had seen Stephanie for quite some time. By early August, Sylvia had contacted the local police to report that her daughter had been missing for a week. Since the incident had occurred some time ago, the police quickly began their search. They spoke to Stephanie's closest friends and began questioning bouncers at clubs, as well as tourists and bartenders at bars frequented by Stephanie and her friends. However, no one knew where Stephanie was. A week had passed, events were happening every day, and new parties were being held, making it easy to forget details. In an effort to jog memories and gather new information from the local community, the police and Stephanie's family distributed flyers with her photo all over town. Unfortunately, the leads they received did not lead to any breakthroughs. During this time, Stephanie had no contact with her family. She did not use a card, phone, or messaging app, which is very unusual for someone her age. Kidnapping seemed unlikely, as no one had contacted her family or demanded ransom during this time. Coast Guard and helicopters patrolled the coast and waters as part of the investigation. Meanwhile, Stephanie's family continued to search for her body. Sylvia believed she was alive and may have made new friends, but everyone else understood that the chances of her being returned safely were slim. The investigation stalled as no leads were found in the case. Sylvia then decided to take matters into her own hands. She first searched Stephanie's room thoroughly. Although the police searched the room for clues, they found nothing. Sylvia felt she knew her daughter better than anyone else, which gave her hope. Her persistence was rewarded when she discovered a note in Stephanie's diary mentioning a young man named Marcus. He lived in Dusseldorf but happened to be in Mallorca during the summer. It turned out that Stephanie had met Marcus at a beach party in Palma, and several of Stephanie's friends confirmed this. Sylvia continued to search Stephanie's room and found a camera with film inside. She discovered some recent photos taken shortly before Stephanie went missing. She decided to develop the photos to see what they revealed. Meanwhile, the police were actively searching for Stephanie and spoke to the two sisters who were with Stephanie the night she went missing. The sisters reported that they had spent the entire evening going to bars and clubs. The three girls had enjoyed the summer together in Mallorca, spending their days at the beach and their nights at local parties and venues. That same evening, the three friends had a good time before going to a bar in El Arenal where the sisters' father worked. The police later discovered a clue. According to the timeline, the girls arrived at the club around 9 p.m. From the start, Stephanie was focused on the DJ. She impressed him and she left the party with him before returning to her friends. They all continued to enjoy the evening together. Around midnight, the sisters decided to go home, but Stephanie insisted on staying until the party ended because she was still interested in the DJ. Sylvia provided the police with the photos from Stephanie's camera for detailed analysis. Among the images, there was one showing Stephanie standing with a young man. The club staff helped the police quickly identify him as Marcus, a 19-year-old DJ who was familiar with Stephanie. The police then visited his home. From the outset, Marcus seemed very nervous but allowed the police to enter his apartment. During their conversation, he acknowledged that he had seen Stephanie that evening and that they had spent time together. They both left the club around 1 in the morning after his DJ shift ended. Initially, he claimed that Stephanie came to his house after the party and left about an hour later. Police quickly became suspicious of Marcus' honesty when they discovered a missing watch and a dress in his home that matched the one Stephanie had worn at the party. The dress had dark red stains on it, making Marcus the prime suspect. Despite this, he maintained that Stephanie had changed clothes and left the apartment unharmed, claiming that she had spilled wine on her dress. Although his testimony was unconvincing, police did not have enough evidence to arrest him or file charges. They sent Stephanie's clothes for analysis. With the circumstances surrounding Stephanie's disappearance unclear, police continued their investigation, focusing on Marcus. On September 20, 2002, a month and a half after the disappearance, a witness contacted the police. He reported finding something suspicious at an abandoned farm in the El Arenal area. Police arrived at the site, which was a large building that had been empty for a long time. Inside, they discovered the badly decomposed body of a female wearing pajamas, underwear, and socks. At first, the police could not identify the body due to its condition. Many began to suspect it was Stephanie, who had been reported missing and was being actively searched for. Police collected a DNA sample and compared it with her mother's DNA, confirming that the body was Stephanie's. The police were unable to link Marcus to the murder. Although some of Stephanie's belongings were found in his apartment, there was no evidence that she had been attacked there. The red stain on her dress turned out to be wine, and Marcus's friends confirmed his alibi about changing clothes. So who could have attacked Stephanie? By this time, Stephanie's family had returned to Germany. Her brother had started school, and Sylvia had returned to work. The police decided to investigate Stephanie's family members more closely, having strong suspicions that she had returned home that night, as her belongings and handbag were present at the house. The main focus of attention was Peter, her mother's boyfriend who lived with Stephanie's family. He was unhappy with Stephanie's behavior, which worried her mother. As a result, Peter often expressed his frustration with Stephanie when she came home late or went to parties. The police in Germany brought Peter in for questioning. He denied any involvement in Stephanie's disappearance and death, but he did provide some valuable information. While the family were in Mallorca renting an apartment, they had a neighbor named Torsten, a man from Germany. Sylvia introduced him to the island and secretly allowed him to stay in the apartment without the landlord's permission to reduce the shared rent. For this reason, they did not initially report the arrangement to the police, as the arrangement was illegal. Torsten was worried about potential legal problems, but Peter believed that Torsten was a kind and calm person who would not cause any trouble. Spanish police investigated Torsten, a new suspect in the case. He was living in Uperda, Germany. He was also in Mallorca at the time of the crime. He had a troubled criminal record, including convictions for robbery and sexual assault. Alarmingly, Torsten had left Mallorca. Spanish and German police joined forces to search for him. Initially, they could not find him at his registered address in Germany, so they began gathering information from local residents, especially his neighbors. The police were quickly alerted by a local resident, a 50-year-old auto mechanic. He reported that in February 2003, Torsten came to him with a white minibus. Torsten requested the installation of an emergency light signaling system above the driver's cabin and asked to paint the vehicle in bright colors. He also wanted the windows tinted so that no one could see him inside, even in bright light. Additionally, he asked to remove the seat and create a large sleeping area, similar to a double bed. The mechanic found several aspects of Torsten's requests suspicious. First, he discovered a receipt for the minibus, which had been rented from a car rental service. This raised a red flag for the mechanic. Why would someone invest in modifying a vehicle that wasn't theirs? Second, he noticed a suspicious bag containing odd items. Strange balls, cable ties, several adult toys, and pills. However, the mechanic did not think much of it at the time. He realized that Torsten was planning to modify the car, and the items in the bag suggested disturbing sexual fantasies. The car was later discovered in a nearby town. Police tracked down Torsten, who was quickly arrested and charged with murder. He denied any involvement in the crime. Police discovered what was described as a sex kit bag in the converted car. The kit included items described by a mechanic as cable ties, various sex toys, women's underwear, anesthetics, sleeping pills, and explicit photographs of several girls. 2 bottles of chloroform with Spanish labels and a toy pistol were found, likely used to scare and trick victims into the car. Torsten had purchased chloroform from a drugstore, and a pharmacist confirmed this. When the police contacted the car rental company, it was discovered that the minibus had been reported stolen, which intensified the suspicion surrounding Torsten. Forensic tests on Stephanie's body revealed the presence of chloroform, which prosecutors considered significant evidence linking Torsten to the crime. At home, the Torsten used chloroform to incapacitate the Stephanie before assaulting her. Chloroform is a powerful sedative that can linger in the body after inhalation, but its effects don't last long if the person is alive. Experts believe that Stephanie died from inhaling too much chloroform, which led to poisoning. During the investigation, police discovered a bag containing suspicious items, as well as another woman's handbag in the car. Inside the handbag, they found documents that helped them identify the owner. She was an 18-year-old girl who fortunately survived her encounter with the Torsten. The victim explained that she had met Torsten by chance in the parking lot, exchanged a brief greeting, and then continued on her way. She later found herself waking up in an unfamiliar van. According to her statements, she did not suffer an overdose and survived the incident. Luckily, the girl was able to identify her attacker. The second victim also reported that she was not harmed. She escaped after regaining consciousness from chloroform. At that time, Torsten was absent from the vehicle, allowing her to flee through an unlocked back door and disappear. Torsten has been charged with the assault on this girl, but suspicions around him persisted after Stephanie's body was discovered on an abandoned farm. Forensic experts conducted thorough examinations of the remains and the site. They found evidence indicating that the killer had been in close proximity to the decomposing body for over a month. This was further supported by specially trained dogs that accurately detected Torsten's scent. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Torsten refused to admit his guilt. In order to get Torsten to talk, one of the police officers agreed to share a cell with him. While in the same cell, the officer quickly developed a rapport with Torsten and managed to get a recorded confession from him. Torsten admitted to killing Stephanie but claimed it was an accident. He explained that they met in her apartment after she returned from a party. He had been watching her for some time, waiting for the right moment to strike. That night, he felt the right moment had come. Stephanie was drunk and her family was asleep, so he decided to make his move. Torsten began to harass Stephanie, who tried to fight him off. This led to an argument between them. He did not go into details but claimed that Stephanie had attacked him first. In response, he pushed her, causing her to hit her head and lose consciousness. Surprisingly, he never mentioned the anesthetic found in her system. Torsten panicked and quickly moved Stephanie's body from the apartment to an abandoned farmhouse. He stayed with the body, worried about being discovered, until he finally decided to flee to Germany. His story seemed unbelievable because Stephanie had no head injuries, suggesting he had lied about how the death occurred. It was also strange that Stephanie's relatives did not immediately suspect the neighbor who had gone missing around the time of Stephanie's murder. For years after the murder, the prosecutor's office finally charged Torsten with assault resulting in death. The charge carries a 10-year prison sentence, and the prosecutor's office sought the maximum sentence. However, Torsten's attorney argued that his confession had been improperly obtained, meaning the recording could not be used to support the charges. The defense argued that Stephanie's body had been accidentally contaminated with chloroform after the autopsy. While this explanation seemed implausible, it was important to disprove it through further investigation. Ultimately, the accidental chloroform contamination theory was rejected. Forensic experts determined that the chloroform levels in Stephanie's blood were too high to be accidental. It was concluded that Torsten had intentionally poisoned Stephanie to prevent her from reporting her to the police. The prosecutor's office also asserted that Torsten's confession had been obtained legally, which was sufficient to file charges. Torsten was diagnosed with an antisocial personality disorder and exhibited clear narcissistic traits. His lawyer asked for leniency, arguing that Torsten had a troubled childhood. His parents separated shortly after he was born, and he grew up in a challenging environment. He experienced several abusive stepfathers and was ultimately abandoned by his mother. Frequent moves and changes of schools made it difficult for him to form lasting relationships. Torsten had no close friends and described his relationships with others as non-existent. His mother occasionally reappeared in his life, only to vanish again. The lawyer explained that these experiences negatively impacted Torsten's early life. He had no understanding of kindness, love, or parental care, which contributed to his antisocial behavior. He frequently found himself in trouble and often acted as a bully, leading to constant conflicts. Following the initial hearings, Torsten received a 10-year prison sentence, the maximum allowed. Both Torsten and his lawyer disagreed with this ruling. The lawyer continued to fight for Torsten and succeeded in getting the case reviewed. The judge ruled that the confession obtained illegally would not be considered evidence. The jury found Torsten guilty of premeditated murder and added another year for concealing evidence. The prosecutor's office convincingly demonstrated that the killer had been waiting for his victim in her apartment. She had returned home, changed into her pajamas, and was getting ready for bed when he attacked her, raped her, and then killed her to cover up his crime. To hide Stephanie's body, Torsten took her to a nearby farm. There, Torsten lived close to the body for over a month, constantly fearing that he would be discovered. During this period, he took part in all the search efforts, was present at almost every search operation, and provided significant support to the family of Stephanie. All of this was intended to distract suspicion away from him. Until the criminal was finally caught, the family of Stephanie had no idea that they had welcomed a man into their home who had escaped from prison in another country. He was wanted for multiple robberies and had also been accused of sexually assaulting another girl using chloroform. In prison, Torsten behaved well and even assisted the priest. He completed his sentence and was released after 11 years. Stephanie's family wanted a harsher punishment and were disappointed with the leniency of his sentence. The police in both Spain and Germany, who were involved in the joint investigation, shared their concerns. They viewed Torsten as a potential threat, fearing that it was only a matter of time before he would attack again, possibly leading to more rapes and murders. Torsten is currently living in Germany, but his exact location and identity remain unknown. And he has not been involved in any new criminal activities, at least for now. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Morrissey. Michael was born in Pennsylvania in 1953. He later moved to Williamsport, Maryland. Overall, his childhood was quite normal. After graduating from high school, he went to college and quickly married his girlfriend, whom he had loved for several years. The feeling was mutual, so she readily agreed. Michael is a person who has tried his best to achieve success in his career, he becoming a well-known insurance agent in the city for some time. Though he was good at it, he eventually switched to pharmaceuticals, where his career truly flourished as a pharmaceutical representative. He started his own business and provided his family with a wonderful life. He earned well, and the family wanted for nothing. Unfortunately, his happy married life did not last long. For years after the birth of their children, Michael and his wife's relationship became cold, so they decided to divorce. Despite the divorce, but he and his wife remain on good terms, and the children still visit him regularly. The son and daughter later recalled that even during the divorce proceedings, they never saw their parents argue. Their relationship remained peaceful and respectful, even as they decided to end their marriage. A few years later, Michael moved to Bucks County, Pennsylvania, to start a new life. He plans to continue his business there until he retires. As a single man, Michael enjoyed his freedom and owned a large, beautiful house by the river. He developed an interest in art and began collecting valuable pieces. Although he didn't aim for world-class masterpieces, he has gathered a fascinating collection that he is very proud of. Michael remained a bachelor for a long time until 2012, when he met a 28-year-old single mother named Jennifer Morrissey. They quickly fell in love and moved into a more intimate relationship. The romance was intense and passionate. Soon, Michael invited Jennifer on a vacation to the Caribbean islands. On the trip, he brought 2 jet skis and 2 ATVs so that both could participate in the activities. He was deeply infatuated with Jennifer, and his relatives were amazed at how much he had changed. He even got his first tattoo in his life, dedicated to Jennifer. In 2015, after they had been dating for 3 years, Michael invited Jennifer to move into his house, and she agreed. He gave her everything, including a comfortable life. Jennifer's stepchild even has his own room. However, the idyll lasted until August 8th of that year, when Michael was found dead in his house. By this time, his relationship with Jennifer had been going on for 3 years, and they were planning a wedding. Earlier, colleagues found Michael lifeless in his home. They initially thought he might have died from a heart attack. When the rescue team arrived, they discovered he's sitting in a chair with his head tilted back. From behind, he appeared to be sleeping, but closer inspection revealed a pool of blood beneath him, with blood streaks around his mouth, nose, and chest. It became clear that he had not died from a heart attack but from gunshot wounds to the face. The wound between his eyes suggested that it was either murder or intentionally ended his life. Forensic experts began analyzing the scene and quickly ruled out intentionally ended his life. If he had shot himself, the gun would have fallen to the floor or at his feet, but the gun was missing. This indicated someone else was present at the time of his death, who pulled the trigger. Forensic experts expanded the search area and examined the living room. A .380 caliber cartridge case was found about 10 meters from Michael. There were no signs of a struggle inside the house, perhaps because the killer suddenly attacked him and acted abruptly. In addition, the watch, a laptop, and a cell phone of Michael's were also lost, indicating a robbery. It appears he witnessed a break-in, prompting the attacker to kill him to silence him. Further clues were found in Michael's bedroom. Investigators learned that he owned 2 registered guns. However, only 1 gun was found, and the holster for his Smith & Wesson .38 was empty. It was confirmed that he was shot with this missing gun. He had kept the gun for self-defense, indicating the perpetrator likely knew its location. There were no signs of a struggle, no injuries on Michael. This suggests the criminal knew the house, the location of the weapon, and how to escape unnoticed. As a result, investigators began testing people who had close contact with Michael to identify the suspect. The robbery theory quickly to unravel. Although Michael's pockets were empty, along with his cell phone, laptop, and watch were all lost, but other valuable objects remained intact. These valuable objects are highly visible, include his art collection, which featured some valuable pieces. Notably, each painting in his collection was lit up. The intruder didn't come to the house to rob, but specifically to kill. Several items were taken to create a fake scene of a robbery, in order to mislead the investigation. One important piece of information is the disappearance of information storage devices, such as mobile phones and laptops, likely containing important, suggesting this was not accidental. The house was not broken into, the doors and windows are still intact. This suggests that either the perpetrator had access to the house or Michael let them in, likely because he trusted them. Upon investigating his recent life, the police found he had no known enemies. He had been in a long-term relationship with a woman named Jennifer Morrissey, who was 33 years old. Some neighbors noted that she was the fiancée of he. However, she had vanished without a trace, which seemed very suspicious. Neighbors described Jennifer as a rather private person who did not like to talk about herself or her past. It was known that she had conflicts with her mother. Jennifer recounted her difficult childhood living in her mother's house, and she had been abused a lot. She accused two men of repeatedly raping her during her teenage years. However, her mother did not believe it. So, she eventually dropped out of school and left home. She recalls this period as a difficult one, and she suffered from severe depression. After leaving home, Jennifer had to support herself, so she found work as a mechanic. She also bought a sporty motorcycle and enjoyed riding around the city in her free time. On social media, she often boasted about speeding on night roads, indicating her love for danger. She also was a thrill seeker and expressed some of her ideals through her tattoos, which included several words across her chest and biceps, as well as a grinning skull on her arm. Jennifer became a mother at 20. The child's biological father quickly abandoned them, so she worked hard to secure her child's future. Besides her mechanic job, she also worked as a dancer at a nightclub in Pennsylvania. It was there in 2012 that she met Michael McNew, a 59-year-old regular at the club. During one visit, they struck up a conversation, and he invited her to dinner. Jennifer agreed to the date on the condition that he pay her $1,200 electricity bill. They began frequently visiting upscale restaurants and expensive places. Michael showered her with lavish gifts, including jewelry, a motorcycle, and a car, and he also took her on trips. Jennifer started referring to him as her sugar daddy, and he was happy to support a beautiful young woman. Jennifer's life is quite difficult, so it's not surprising that she saw Michael as a chance to improve things she had been unable to for years. She felt that Michael not only brought her the opportunity to get rich, but also brought her the respect and understanding she had never experienced in her life. They started dating in 2015, and their relationship deepened when they moved in together. Initially, their relationship seemed strong, but over time, it began to decline. Neighbors reported a major conflict happened a few months before Michael passed away. Some witnessed an intense argument, after which Michael and Jennifer allegedly separated. However, they continued living together even though their relationship has deteriorated greatly. Jennifer vanished shortly after the tragedy, and it appeared intentional. At that time, Jennifer was not considered a suspect. The police chose to reach out to Michael's children. They couldn't accept that their father had passed away. As soon as they learned what had happened to their father, they immediately packed their things. Michael's son, Patrick, traveled from Pittsburgh, while his sister and their mother traveled from Maryland. They all met and headed to Michael's home. Patrick told investigators that he never took his father's relationship with stripper Jennifer seriously. He thought Jennifer was too rude, brazen, and greedy, so he didn't want his father to have a long-term relationship with her. Michael's relatives and many friends tried to persuade him to end the relationship for fear she might endanger. In June 2016, Michael's daughter, Katie, got married. She told her father that she did not want Jennifer to attend her upcoming wedding. Michael decided to skip this event, so the wedding happened without the bride's father. Despite his relatives' objections, Michael continued to date Jennifer. Michael even made her the beneficiary of 2 life insurance policies worth about $500,000. By then, everyone knew Jennifer was frequently using illegal substances, exploiting Michael, and possibly having an affair. She severely damaged the relationship between Michael and Patrick, leading to frequent conflicts between them. Many believe that she did this on purpose so that she could gain access to all of Michael's assets, a wealthy man. However, in 2017, new issues emerged when she started distancing herself from him. She would leave without notice, came home late at night and just went to sleep without explaining anything. It was obvious that she was not really interested in the relationship anymore. During this time, she began using more illegal substances during this time, resulting in a serious addiction. She was arrested several times. Twice for substance abuse and once for causing an accident. A year before the tragic incident, Jennifer had cut off a cyclist with her car. Despite these issues, Michael stood by her. He helped pay all the fines and legal costs, making monthly payments for 2 cases filed against her, amounting to about $4,000 in total. According to Michael's children, shortly before his death, he mentioned his intention to break up with Jennifer and cancel their wedding plans. For Jennifer, this means she will lose everything, including a life of luxury that he has given her. She had to manage on her own and didn't have much money. She would also lose the large house and access to all the luxuries he had provided. The children of Michael, Patrick, and Katie believed that money was the motive for the murder. Jennifer simply lost control of herself as she found herself facing the possibility of losing everything. Michael had died 24 to 48 hours before his colleagues found him. The cause of his death was a gunshot to the face, fired at very close range. The bullet impacted the facial bone, fragmented, and split into 2 parts. One of them reached the brain, causing instant death. The police had to mobilize all resources and seize every opportunity to capture Jennifer and interrogate her, as she was the prime suspect. She was known to be on probation due to an accident. The police hoped she would come to the department to check in with the inspector, and as they anticipated, she did. On August 10th, 4 days after Michael's death, Jennifer unexpectedly arrived at the police station to pay court costs. She also reported to the police that she had seen on the news that her lover, Michael, had been killed, which surprised her greatly. The dispatcher then informed the detectives leading the investigation about this. It seemed odd because news of the crime had appeared on TV and social media almost immediately after the murder. Why did Jennifer wait 4 days to contact the police? The detectives reached out to Jennifer and arranged to meet her at the station the next day. They didn't reveal that she was a suspect in the murder but said they wanted to ask a few questions about a T-shirt. Meanwhile, they requested a warrant to examine her communications. However, Jennifer sensed something was amiss and didn't show up for the meet. Instead, she disappeared for several days. From experience, the detectives knew that this behavior was typical of criminals who are buying time. During such periods, they often fabricate an alibi or attempt to hide. Meanwhile, the police continued gathering evidence against Jennifer's. To learn more, the investigators spoke to multiple friends of Michael. One friend revealed that shortly before the crime, Michael had called him, expressing fear for life. Michael had discovered the identity of Jennifer's boyfriend, a man known by the alias Ruthless. According to Michael, this man was extremely dangerous. The situation was spiraling out of control, and Michael intended to break off his engagement quickly to protect himself. The man using the alias Ruthless was actually Charles Culo, a notorious figure in criminal circles who had been imprisoned several times. He had committed a string of serious offenses, with most charges related to the distribution of illegal substances. Just days before Michael's death, Charles was released from custody. Jennifer quickly moved in with Charles, but many of her belongings were still at Michael's house. She would occasionally stop by to collect her things, and Michael threatened to give them away to avoid seeing her again. Michael's friend mentioned that he was unhappy about Jennifer's affair. However, Michael chose not to compete with people from the criminal world and decided to end the relationship. The police believed this was a pivotal moment in the investigation. They had a new prime suspect, Charles, who would not have hesitated to shoot a defenseless elderly man. It was suspected that Charles accompanied her to Michael's house. And Charles and Jennifer simply wanted to make a profit, so they killed Michael so they wouldn't be hindered. Meanwhile, Jennifer missed a scheduled check-in with the inspector, which allowed the police to detain her and bring her to justice. On August 25, 2017, police officers went to the motorcycle repair shop where Jennifer worked and arrested her for violating her probation. Later, one of Jennifer's cellmates reported that she behaved very suspiciously during her imprisonment and confessed to intentionally killing Michael. The investigators brought Jennifer's in for questioning and informed her that she was suspected of being involved in the murder. She chose not to answer their questions and instead hired a lawyer. Meanwhile, a warrant was issued to access the communication devices of Jennifer. Jennifer's phone was found at the crime scene at 9:45 p.m. during her correspondence with Michael, confirming she was present at the time of the murder. Afterward, her phone's geolocation showed she traveled about 20 kilometers south to Charles's trailer, arriving there around 11 p.m. Michael's phone remained at the house until about 1 a.m. before moving towards the river, where it stopped working, likely after being thrown into the water. If Jennifer had already left the scene, who took the phone? An electronics expert discovered that Jennifer's phone automatically connected to Michael's Wi-Fi network at about 9:45 p.m. on August 6, 2017, when the murder occurred. This suggests she was very close to the router at that time. The police continued their investigation and discovered that Jennifer had a second mobile phone. They accessed this device, which actually belonged to Michael and was password protected. There was a risk of being unable to unlock it, but thanks to a list of passwords found on Michael's computer, used by Jennifer, they successfully unlocked the phone. This action uncovered significant evidence. The investigation revealed that shortly before his death, Michael was communicating with Jennifer. While she had deleted much of the information, detectives were able to recover it. Michael intended to contact the FBI to ensure Charles was imprisoned for life. Naturally, Charles could not allow this, so investigators believe he chose to kill Michael. Although Charles's phone was examined, he didn't appear to take these threats seriously. Jennifer, however, reacted more aggressively. Michael indicated he was willing to abandon his plan to contact the FBI if Jennifer returned to him and left Charles. The last message Michael sent before his death was "I love you," to which Jennifer did not respond. After accessing Michael's social media accounts, it was discovered that the day after his death, Jennifer began sharing various stories about the incident with her friends and acquaintances. Jennifer recounted many different stories to everyone. She told some that he had been attacked, but she told some other people that she didn't know what happened because they broke up a long time ago. She did this to spread misinformation and cover her tracks. It was obvious that she and Charles were involved in the murder. Eventually, the detective spoke with Charles, and he confessed. According to him, he was not involved in Michael's death. The murder was committed by Jennifer. That day, Jennifer returned to him late in the evening and admitted she had killed Michael. She explained that after an unpleasant conversation, Michael approached her with a gun. She managed to take the gun from him, but it accidentally fired, killing him. Frightened, she left immediately afterward. Jennifer requested to return to Michael to ensure he was either dead or to administer first aid if he was still alive. However, Charles refused to be involved in the crime, so he asked his friend Jerry to take Jennifer to the victim. Jerry, who lived nearby in a trailer with his mother, cooperated with the investigation and confirmed that he drove Jennifer to the river house that evening. He wasn't initially told the reason, but once they arrived, he realized what was happening. It was noted that the crime scene did not resemble a place where a fight had occurred, as Jennifer had claimed, but rather an execution. Michael was sitting in his chair when Jennifer arrived, and she neither checked his pulse nor attempted to help him. Instead, Jennifer collected valuables, removing the watch from his wrist, taking his laptop, and tossing his mobile phone into the river. Jerry then drove her to Charles's trailer. The police discovered traces of she DNA in Michael's pockets, which she had searched. Charles defended himself by explaining that he was not at Michael's house because he had been in an accident shortly before the murder, which left him with serious injuries. At the time, he was using a wheelchair to move around, could barely walk, and was in no condition to commit the crime. Furthermore, he was aware that he needed to avoid any trouble while on probation. Charles was very convincing, and the investigators believed him. They verified his story, confirming that he was indeed recovering from the accident. On September 29, 2017, Jennifer Morrissey was charged with first-degree murder, robbery, and tampering with evidence. The trial was set for January 24, 2019. The prosecutor stated that these charges were linked to several conflicts before the attack. Jennifer felt most upset because Michael did not want to continue funding her lifestyle and left her, which further aggravated her. Additionally, Michael's death was supposed to bring financial gain, as Jennifer claimed an insurance payout of about $500,000. The crucial evidence against Jennifer came from Jerry, a friend of Charles, who testified at the trial. Jerry confirmed that Jennifer returned to the crime scene to eliminate evidence. Due to his cooperation, he was not charged. Likewise, Jennifer's boyfriend Charles was not charged because he also testified against her, even though he initially protected her, delayed contacting the police, and destroyed the murder weapon. Inmates also testified against Jennifer during the trial. The defense argued that Jennifer was not cruel and could not be accused of being vindictive or aggressive. To support this claim, Jennifer chose to testify herself. During the trial, she claimed she went to Michael's house in the evening to collect her belongings. He allegedly met her at the door with a gun, refused her entry, and aimed the gun at her. She said she reacted quickly, a struggle followed, and during the struggle, the gun accidentally went off, shooting he in the face. Jennifer maintained it was an act of self-defense, insisting that if she hadn't shot him, he might have shot her. However, her story didn't align with the fact that Michael was found shot while sitting in a chair, suggesting he wasn't at the door as she claimed. This made her account seem unbelievable. Forensic experts concluded that the most likely scenario was intentional murder. Evidence showed that the gun was about 3 meters from Michael's head when it was fired. Jennifer had aimed precisely between his eyes to kill him swiftly, execution style. There was no evidence of a struggle between them. On February 1, 2019, the jury convened to deliberate a verdict. Jennifer Morrissey was found guilty of first-degree murder, theft, and tampering with evidence. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, she never showed remorse. Michael's son was the most affected during the trial investigations. He repeatedly expressed his hatred towards Jennifer because she took his father away from him. Because of Jennifer, the relationship between him and his father has greatly deteriorated, and now they can no longer be reconciled. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Lucy Letby. Today, we will discuss the case of a baby killer who was dubbed the most brutal in British forensic history. This case began in 2015. In the UK, about 700,000 babies are born each year, with around 3,000 admitted to the hospital in Chester, located in northwest England. The following year, from June 2015 to June 2016, staff in the neonatal department noticed a sharp increase in infant mortality rates. This troubling trend was occurring in the wards where premature and ill babies were treated. Doctors sensed that something was wrong, and internal investigations did not uncover any medical explanations for the deaths. The high infant mortality rate prompted police to investigate the neonatal unit, where they uncovered disturbing circumstances surrounding several deaths. After an extensive investigation, a young nurse who had worked at the hospital for many years was arrested. The investigation has revealed disturbing details about the incidents, leaving the families of the dead children devastated by the news. 5 years after the first child's death, police contacted the family and others, forcing the parents to hear heartbreaking details about what had happened to their child and testify against the suspect. In court, numerous witness statements were presented. The children were murdered using various methods. One was poisoned with insulin by a nurse, while another suffered severe liver damage. However, the most common method used was injecting air into the bloodstream, which created an air bubble that blocked blood flow. This technique was particularly insidious as it left little evidence, making it hard to prove it was lethal. The motive behind the nurse's actions remains unclear. The police determined that she gained knowledge about blood flow from the courses she took to enhance her qualifications. They warned her that injecting air into a vein could be extremely dangerous. Soon after completing these courses, a tragic incident occurred where a baby died after being injected with air through an intravenous drip. In this case, it was difficult to establish the exact cause of death. The parents of the baby described his condition as critical. They would visit the hospital every morning and leave in the evening, hoping for his recovery. However, one night his condition suddenly worsened, and the doctors believed he had no chance of survival. This led the parents to make the heartbreaking choice to disconnect their newborn from life support. The nurse killer worked another night shift the following day and attempted to harm the sister of the initial victim. Fortunately, the girl was able to escape unharmed. The third incident involved a child known in court as Baby D, where air was intentionally introduced into the child's body. This incident took place just 2 weeks after the first one, in June 2015. Notably, Baby D was a full-term infant, unlike the other victims who were all premature and receiving specialized care until they could survive without life support. Despite being full-term, Baby D had some health complications. The mother went through a long and difficult labor, after which the baby had difficulty breathing. The baby should not have been in the neonatal department, but due to a tragic coincidence, he ended up there. The baby's mother was the first to testify in court against the nurse who was suspected of murder. In her statement, she described seeing the nurse leaning over their child's crib during the day. Although it seemed like the nurse was doing nothing, her wandering around looked very suspicious. That night, the parents were awakened by a nurse who informed them that their child had suddenly become very ill. When they arrived at the ward, the doctor attempted to resuscitate Baby D, performing life-saving measures repeatedly until he realized the baby had died. This all happened right in front of the baby's mother and father. The investigation revealed that during the night shift, the suspect gave 3 lethal injections to the child. After Baby D died, doctors observed an unusual rash on the victim's stomach. small purple spots that the medical staff could not identify. They were unsure of its significance. Later, this distinctive rash appeared on many victims of the nurse killer. Interestingly, the spots appeared briefly and then vanished completely. One of the victims, known as Baby E, was part of a set of twins, and their mother also testified in court. The twins were diagnosed with a minor illness that required treatment in a medical facility. While the mother was with her husband, she began experiencing contractions 50 kilometers away from the hospital. They rushed to the hospital, where she had a cesarean section, and the newborns were immediately taken to the neonatal department. The mother stayed in the hospital to recover from the surgery. Her husband left for work, and on August 3rd, she went to check on her twin babies to make sure everything was all right. She followed her regular hygiene routine by wiping their heads and necks and changing their diapers. A few hours later, around 9 p.m., she heard her son crying loudly and rushed to his side. When she got there, she noticed blood around his mouth. The nurse responsible for the care of the babies was nearby in the department at that time. It was later determined that the mother almost caught the nurse in the act of trying to harm her baby, which scared the nurse away. However, the mother didn't have enough time to fully comprehend the danger her child was in. The mother screamed for help, prompting another nurse to escort her to the ward to help her calm down. Meanwhile, the baby started to bleed heavily, and the bleeding could not be stopped. The doctors fought to save the baby's life for about an hour, but their efforts were unsuccessful. Similar to previous cases, the baby had a suspicious rash on his body. The attending physician noted the rash recurred around the time of death and commented that he had never seen anything like it before. Determined to uncover the mystery behind these alarming occurrences, the doctor began researching medical reference books. He discovered that the rash was linked to a blockage of the pulmonary artery. This revelation marked a significant turning point for the medical staff, as they were now closer to solving the mysterious deaths of infants in the clinic. During the trial, the doctor admitted that he only fully understood the situation months after the deaths of the children. The doctors at the clinic became increasingly concerned about the cases involving children. It was clear that something troubling was happening, but no one suspected that it could be caused by someone meant to safeguard the children's lives. One doctor, who determined that all the children had suffered from pulmonary embolism, began to investigate further. He soon noticed a troubling pattern. Every time a child died, a nurse named Lucy Letby was on duty and had been seen by the parents before the deaths. It was hard to believe. No one could imagine that someone as kind as Lucy could be responsible for such actions. Lucy Letby was born on January 4, 1990. She grew up in Harris Ford and attended Elston High School and Hartford College. A childhood friend said she was a dedicated student who had wanted to be a nurse since she was a child. Lucy pursued her passion for caring for newborns by studying nursing at the University of Chester. During her studies, she worked as a nurse for 3 years, completing an internship at Liverpool Women's Hospital. The whole family was proud of her high academic achievements and believed that she wanted to help children. In 2010, Lucy started working as a nurse in the neonatal department of the hospital where many tragic events occurred. Her family described her as someone who loved saving the lives of babies, witnessing their recovery, and supporting their families. She was actively involved in charity work and participated in fundraising for sick children. Because of her kind and gentle personality, many found it hard to believe that she could be involved in the deaths of children. However, evidence suggested that Lucy was the one who injected air into the bloodstream of her young victims. Doctors took time to investigate additional evidence to confirm their suspicions about Lucy's involvement, as there were many uncertainties. Ultimately, everyone agreed that Lucy should be reported. The head physician became aware of the neonatal department's concerns regarding Lucy. However, that evening, the management was preoccupied with their own issues and overlooked the seriousness of the situation. They even pressured doctors not to cause panic, fearing that it would draw unwanted public attention to the problem. The hospital's reputation was at stake, and management was worried about the potential consequences. At this point, the doctors had repeatedly asked the hospital management to take action against the nurse they suspected of being a killer. Unfortunately, their concerns were completely ignored, and no one took them seriously. Their fellow nurses were also confused, unsure whether to go to the police, as they found it hard to believe that one of their own could commit such terrible acts. This left the doctors in a difficult position, forcing them to step back and reevaluate all they knew. They were focused on the alarming trend of healthy or nearly healthy children, who had been born prematurely without any clear reasons, continuing to die. These babies did not respond to resuscitation efforts, and in most cases, developed a mysterious rash that vanished after death. Ultimately, they decided that the best course of action was to carry out a police investigation to find out if Lucy was responsible in these situations. As a result, the hospital staff contacted the police directly. The doctor who initially reported the concern stated that he took all necessary steps to protect the children in his care. However, he was unable to communicate with upper management, and any delay could jeopardize the lives of other infants. So he decided to call the police. Police quickly began investigating these horrific crimes. As the case stalled, rumors started circulating within the hospital. It became evident, even from a brief examination, that Lucy was connected to the deceased children, as these incidents only occurred during her shifts. She was consistently present when the children faced difficulties. This information spread rapidly among the medical staff. Regardless of whether the rumors were proven true, tensions within the team escalated. Lucy faced open accusations, and she was subjected to significant pressure, yet she maintained her innocence regarding the babies' deaths. Lucy believes they are trying to blame her for the failures of other doctors. This situation began in July 2015. Later, a group of doctors emerged who attempted to blame a nurse for the deaths of newborns. They voiced their concerns, and during the trial, Lucy accused them of conspiring to hold her responsible for the deaths in the neonatal unit. Lucy openly made these accusations because she believed they were trying to cover up serious violations connected to hospital management, which could potentially implicate many staff members and administrators in the deaths of the infants. In reality, doctors were investigating the causes of the newborn deaths. They expressed their disbelief that a nurse, whose role was to care for and protect children, could intentionally administer lethal injections. However, as more evidence was reviewed, the connections became increasingly evident. After thoroughly examining the situation, the doctors concluded that the only possible explanation for the deaths was the introduction of air, which was noted to be associated with unexplained spots. The major challenge was that lethal injections leave almost no evidence, making it extremely difficult to prove they were the cause of death. The only potential evidence against Lucy involved 2 cases of insulin poisoning in children. However, at the time the tests were conducted, these cases had not yet been evaluated. In the past, it was extremely difficult to determine these tests. However, the seriousness of the situation required the doctors and investigators to be diligent in gathering evidence, as it could prove Lucy's guilt in an extremely disturbing crime. They were finally able to obtain blood samples taken 8 months before the trial began. The 2 boys, each from 2 different sets of twins, had been poisoned with insulin. The insulin levels in their blood were significantly higher than normal, and such a high dose could not have been given by mistake, as the medical facility had put safeguards in place to prevent accidental overdose. However, the objects showed abnormal indicators that led to their deaths, which was confirmed through examination of the evidence. These insulin-poisoned children were taken care of by Lucy. Another significant case in the investigation was the death of a child, which was likely the most brutal. This was the same baby who began bleeding heavily, and the mother saw Lucy nearby. Medical staff reported that a metal instrument had been inserted into the baby's mouth, causing severe internal injuries. During the nearly hour-long resuscitation attempt, the baby bled from both the mouth and nose, losing about 25% of his blood volume. Doctors fought to save the baby, performing CPR and injecting 5 doses of adrenaline to stimulate the heart. Although the heartbeat returned temporarily, the baby did not breathe for more than 15 minutes, giving him no chance of survival. At the time of death, before any investigation began, it was concluded that the cause was natural. Extensive bleeding can sometimes result from intestinal infections in babies. Since there was no suspicion of medical personnel being involved at that time, an autopsy was not performed. This decision is viewed as the biggest mistake made. If it had been established then that the bleeding was due to a foreign object, the investigation would have started sooner, leading to more evidence against Lucy. A similar situation arose with a girl who was one of a set of triplets. After an autopsy, forensic experts discovered she had a serious liver injury. Experienced specialists compared the injury severity to the aftermath of a major accident. However, the exact cause of the girl's ruptured liver was never determined. Lucy, the suspect, went on to kill the second triplet, who was later named in court. There were no other tragic incidents during Lucy's long holiday in Ibiza. However, 2 children died just hours after she returned to work for her first shift. A third child was also in danger, but the parents insisted on taking their child to another medical facility because they felt something was wrong and did not trust the hospital staff. On June 23, 2016, during a separate set of triplet assessments at the trial, a baby was in critical condition with a severely swollen stomach, struggling to breathe. He was placed on a ventilator while numerous staff members, including Lucy, worked frantically around him. The baby's body showed signs of swelling, and his brain was deprived of oxygen for a long time. Doctors worked tirelessly to save him for 17 hours before he passed away. They waited for the transport team to arrive to transfer the baby to the central hospital, while the remaining staff anxiously counted down the minutes until help arrived. Lucy made a shocking comment. "He would not survive anyway." She said it so calmly that everyone was taken aback. She seemed to take pleasure in the unfolding drama and appeared to be waiting for the baby to die. Following these incidents, the doctors, feeling desperate, contacted the police. After the attack on the triplets, Lucy was moved to another department. In that new department, they did not encounter similar issues, despite having the same staff and responsibilities, and the mysterious deaths ceased. However, the doctors recognized the need for stricter security measures. Consequently, Lucy was suspended from work a month. During this time, the hospital continued to investigate, but there was not enough evidence against Lucy. In response to the suspension without any clear reason, Lucy filed a complaint against the hospital. As a result, the management apologized and decided to reinstate her. However, her colleagues disagreed with this decision. They argued that Lucy should only return to work after installing surveillance cameras in every room to monitor her actions. This solution worked, and after the cameras were installed, no further incidents occurred, even after Lucy resumed work. At the same time, the police were conducting an investigation. They discovered evidence showing that Lucy was trying to get the attention of a doctor from the resuscitation team, whose identity remains confidential. Love letters addressed to him were later found in her home. This doctor worked in the neonatal department, but he was married, 17 years older than Lucy, and saw her only as a friend and colleague, with no romantic interest. Before that, they attended advanced training courses in London together, had lunch, went for walks, communicated constantly, and he often drove her home. When the doctor arrived to testify, Lucy lost control. Before this point, she had been distant and unresponsive, but when she saw him, She began to cry and tried to leave until her lawyer calmed her down. This reaction was puzzling and difficult to explain. Lucy asserts that her feelings for the resuscitation doctor are purely friendship, and he supports her statement. However, psychologists and experts investigating the case noted her behavior. Lucy wrote him love letters, expressed joy when he gave her chocolate, and closely monitored his social media accounts as well as those of his wife and teenage children. Experts believe that Lucy deliberately created situations to get closer to him, especially since he was the one performing the resuscitation in all the relevant cases. However, during court proceedings, Lucy dismissed these claims as baseless speculation. In July 2018, Lucy Letby was arrested for the first time. Police conducted 2 simultaneous raids, one at her parents' home and another at her own residence. During these searches, a significant amount of evidence was collected, which aided the investigation and supported the case against her. This evidence included medical documents, notes, stickers, and photographs of children's cards found on a mobile phone. More details will be shared later. She was released on bail but was arrested again a year later. In June 2019, Lucy Letby was charged with the murder of 7 children and the attempted murder of 10 others. The trial will begin in October 2022. Is expected to last at least 6 months due to the sheer volume of material to be reviewed, including more than 100 hours of questioning in some 5,500 depositions. However, there are significant restrictions on sharing information because the case is both complex and sensitive. In particular, the identities of the deceased are being kept secret because of their age. Key pieces of evidence include postcards that Lucy created for the victims' parents, expressing her condolences and posing with them. These documents were found on Lucy's phone. A key moment in the court proceedings was when stickers discovered in the Lucy's home were presented. One sticker describes her as the embodiment of evil, while another reveals her confession to killing babies. The note stated that Lucy felt she did not deserve to live and that she had deliberately killed them because she believed she was not good enough to take care of them. She described herself as a bad and evil person. It was also written on the back of the note that she needed help and could not go on anymore. Lucy kept a diary in which she wrote about the problems she faced in life. Lucy thought that she would never have children or a loving husband and family. Lucy felt helpless in everything and was often afraid. She expressed her pain in these short notes filled with despair. She cried every day at the same time. Even though she wrote that nothing was wrong, she still felt anxious about her situation. Initially, Lucy was happy to befriend the resuscitation doctor she loved. She detailed their encounter and how he supported her. However, he turned his back on her in early 2018, just before her first arrest. This was when Lucy was suspended from work, which caused her to fall into depression, as her job was her purpose in life. The lawyer argued that these notes did not prove her guilt, especially given the myriad of issues she faced. She was suspended, hospital staff were accusing her of abuse, and her mental state was unstable. She blamed herself for what happened because she felt she did not have enough time to help her young patients. The defense argued that Lucy's notes did not admit to the murders and suggested that she was only indirectly involved. The prosecution presented a note containing the names of the triplets who were victims of Lucy's attack as evidence. The note included names, birth dates, expressions of regret, and phrases that implied she was involved in the tragedy. It was found under the bed along with the children's medical records. When police searched her apartment, Lucy claimed that these notes could have accidentally ended up at her home when she forgot to throw away all the contents of the pockets of her work coat. Lucy appeared in court visibly emotional as she took the witness stand. She expressed her devastation over being suspended from her job, which had been incredibly important to her. Lucy described her time in prison as particularly challenging, compounded by her depression. The situation escalated when police arrived at her home to conduct a search at 6 a.m. while she was with her father. Being accused of multiple child murders was a complete shock to her. She was released on bail 3 days after her arrest, but in 2019, she faced a second arrest. Lucy stated that these experiences left a lasting impact on her life, making her fearful of loud noises and heightening her sensitivity to stimuli. A prison psychologist later diagnosed her with post-traumatic stress disorder. The trial made everything worse for the Lucy. She had to travel an hour and a half to the courtroom and was only returned to her cell around 7 p.m., which was exhausting for her. She often refused to attend court hearings in front of the families of the murdered children, which the victims' parents found disrespectful. In court, the Lucy expressed that she was going through a tough time filled with discrimination and accusations. She also lost her cherished job, which affected her deeply. The pressure was overwhelming, especially with the possibility of losing her freedom and never getting married. At times, she felt completely helpless during this difficult period. She began to experience mental health challenges due to increasing pressures and difficulties. According to Lucy, she started her career at a medical institution in 2010 as a full-time qualified nurse, caring for 3 to 4 babies in her unit. To enhance her skills, she participated in special training courses and continually pursued additional education to improve her knowledge. Ultimately, Lucy earned the qualification of a mentor, which is a notable achievement for a nurse in her field. Lucy loved her job and enjoyed learning new skills to improve her abilities. In the spring of 2015, she completed a 6-month course in Liverpool, which enabled her to work with babies and children coming from intensive care. She took great pride in her work and would not trade her position for anything. From June 2015 to June 2016, Lucy continued to work in the same department. During this time, several critically ill patients were admitted to the hospital simultaneously. The complex needs of the children included serious conditions, such as blood clotting disorders. Lucy worked incredibly hard, but accumulating many overtime hours. She dedicated all her free time to her job, which took a toll on her, leaving her completely exhausted by her daily responsibilities. In 2015, one of the children sadly passed away. This was a challenging moment for Lucy, but she felt supported by her colleagues, who encouraged one another as best they could. Although this incident was likely not her fault, Lucy appreciated how it brought the entire team together, and she wished to experience that sense of unity again. The situation was complicated by many controversial aspects. The prosecution thoroughly investigated and gathered information about children's deaths in the hospital over a 6-year period, starting from when the staff filed a complaint. Throughout this time, Lucy was seen as a skilled and competent nurse with a strong work ethic. She was highly regarded as a specialist, making it hard to believe she could be involved in the deaths. The investigation gathered strong evidence that pointed to her guilt in the horrific murders committed by the nurse. It is noteworthy that she acted completely openly. The jury took 22 days to deliberate before finding her guilty of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder 10 others. However, thanks to media coverage, she became known as the most brutal child killer in British history. On August 21, 2023, Lucy Letby was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, the harshest penalty available under UK law. She is the 4th woman in the history of the UK to receive such a sentence. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kathy Krausnack. On February 19, 1982, police were called to the Krausnack family home, where they discovered the body of 29-year-old Kathy Krausnack. An axe was found embedded in her head, the only fatal wound. Earlier, Kathy's 30-year-old husband, James Krausnack, had run into a neighbor's house while holding their 3-year-old daughter. He was covered in blood and appeared distressed, reporting that his wife showed no signs of life. While crying and agitated, he waited for police to arrive. James told police that he had left for work at Kodak around 6:30 a.m., where he worked as an economist. He spent the day completing routine tasks while his wife, Kathy, and their daughter, Sarah, were still asleep at home. Kathy had planned to spend the day with their daughter. When James returned home around 5 p.m., he noticed the garage door open, the kitchen window broken, and the glass door between the garage and the house shattered. Realizing something was wrong, he went inside and found his wife lying on the bed. He was shocked and momentarily unable to speak. He then noticed his 3-year-old daughter lying next to the bed, unharmed. To ensure her safety, James took his daughter to a neighbor's house. The neighbor opened the door and saw James, who was frightened and crying. At his request, she called 911, asking them to come quickly because he claimed there had been a murder. Police spoke to Sarah, who seemed unaware of what had happened. She said she saw a multicolored bad guy on her parents' bed and saw her mother with blood on her face. It is extremely distressing for a child to be left alone in an apartment with a murdered mother for an entire day. This was a disturbing aspect of the case. Fortunately, Sarah was too young to fully understand the situation, so it did not affect her mental state much. The neighbors did not observe or hear anything unusual. The police investigated the crime scene but did not find any significant evidence or clues. The murder weapon, an axe, was taken from Kathy's family garage. It had been used to cut the grass. Notably, there were no fingerprints on the axe, suggesting that it had been deliberately cleaned. In addition, forensic experts found no fingerprints inside the house, which was puzzling since 3 people lived there and could have touched many objects. The police found this strange and assumed that the perpetrator had cleaned the entire house. However, the police did notice something strange in the kitchen. A damp bathroom rug was drying in the garage. James claimed that he had no idea why the rug was there and that nothing of note had been found on it. In 1982, forensic techniques did not allow for the collection or analysis of DNA. Police suspected that the incident was a botched robbery, theorizing that the attackers may have become frightened and decided to eliminate Kathy, a potential witness. However, some valuables were still intact. Kathy's bag, which had been left in the kitchen, had been emptied onto the floor, but the contents, money, jewelry, and expensive tea sets, were all there and neatly arranged. This raised an important question: why did the criminals leave these items behind? Even the cash that was openly left on the dresser had not been taken. Perhaps the criminal had scared Kathy, but in this case, fingerprints would have been left on these items. Yet, there were none, which was puzzling. This behavior was unusual, and the police noticed these discrepancies, raising suspicions that the crime scene had been staged. Some items were arranged in a way that suggested they were deliberately placed there. A crucial reason for dismissing robbery as a motive was that nothing had been stolen. Seasoned police officers, who regularly dealt with burglaries, immediately recognized that this incident was different. While murders were rare in Brighton, thefts and robberies occurred almost daily. Police believed that Kathy's death was a premeditated murder. The initial suspect was, of course, her husband, who discovered her body. Police began investigating James. James's friends and acquaintances described them as a happy, even idealistic couple. They had both grown up in the same Michigan city. Kathy came from a family of truck drivers, while James's parents owned a successful carpet store. They met in high school and began dating in college, eventually marrying on May 3, 1974. After their marriage, Kathy continued her studies in economics in Colorado, and in 1978, they celebrated the birth of their daughter, Sarah. Meanwhile, James became interested in further education and pursued a doctorate in economics. James then took a teaching position at the University of Lynchburg in Virginia. In 1981, the family relocated to Brighton, New York, where James found a job as an economist. Kathy was a devoted and caring mother to their daughter, always attentive and loving. However, friends noticed a significant change in Kathy's mood 6 months before her death. She became unusually irritable and restless, though they did not know the reasons behind her behavior. As the police investigated the family's situation, they discovered that things were not as perfect as they initially appeared. The couple kept their problems private, never discussing their issues publicly or seeking advice from others, which made it difficult to gather information. However, police found a brochure for marriage counseling in the family car, suggesting that there had been ongoing discord in their relationship. The police also contacted James's employer and learned that he had misrepresented his qualifications, claiming to have a doctorate. This deception led to him being assigned a role he was unqualified for, resulting in stress at work and further complicating his situation. James's cooperation helped the police gather information, and James agreed to attend the next meeting for questioning, but he did not attend. Less than 24 hours after the murder, he left the city without informing the police. This action of his made the police suspicious. He was intentionally fleeing. Police later discovered that James had gone to his parents' home in Michigan. They found him again and questioned him. He cooperated with the police by providing blood and hair samples for analysis. Unfortunately, DNA testing was not available at the time, so this did not yield any useful results. 10 days after Kathy was found dead in her bed, James hired a lawyer. The police did not have enough evidence to bring any charges in 1982. Police focused on information that James had left for work at 6:30 a.m. It was important to verify this detail and determine whether he could have been home at the time of the murder. Forensic examinations showed that Kathy had died in her sleep between 4:30 and 7:30 a.m., meaning she could have been murdered with an axe shortly after James left for work. While it was possible that the husband had committed the crime before leaving, it was difficult to understand why he would do so and then go to work, leaving their 3-year-old daughter behind. The mother's body remained in the house throughout the day. The investigation stalled. The evidence collected and the documents found did not shed light on the events of that morning. The James had no clear motive, making a jury trial unlikely. If the prosecution lost, they would not be able to bring new charges against him. In 1997, James met his old friend Sharon at a trade show. Their relationship quickly blossomed, and James asked her out, which she accepted. Sharon noticed that James was still deeply affected by his past loss. He seemed shocked by the traumatic event. James shared the basics of that terrible day with Sharon but avoided going into detail, and Sharon did not want to press him for more information. Their mutual understanding helped strengthen their relationship, and they later married. In 1999, they moved to another city, then moved across the country. At the same time, police continued their efforts on Kathy's case. New police re-examined the evidence, leading to the analysis of a large number of items related to the case. The police were committed to finding justice for the woman who had been so brutally murdered. In 2015, the FBI assisted Brighton police in their investigation, which led them to focus on a suspect, Kathy's husband, James. On April 16, 2016, 34 years after the murder, police made a surprise visit to James's home, hoping to meet him and possibly uncover inconsistencies in his previous statements. However, their plan did not go as planned. James appeared calm and welcoming. He chatted with the officers, agreed to have the conversation recorded, and did not request an attorney. They talked for an hour at the kitchen table, but James remained calm throughout the conversation. Eventually, one of the police asked him directly if he had anything to do with his wife's death. James was angry, said that he would never hurt his wife. Sharon defended him, saying that in all the time they were together, she had never witnessed any aggressive behavior from him. He was a caring and loving husband who would never lay a hand on her. She firmly believed that he was incapable of such cruelty. Sharon also participated in the police interrogation. Throughout the interrogation, she never doubted her husband's innocence. She felt that she had seen his sincere heart and kind nature over the years. Although her views seemed naive, she held these beliefs deeply. She never asked about the fate of James' ex-wife, as she was satisfied with the brief explanation he gave at the beginning of their relationship and never mentioned it again. Police found themselves at a dead end once again, prompting the decision to review all the evidence collected for DNA testing nearly 40 years after the crime. The murder weapon, an axe found in the victim's head, was sent to the FBI for analysis. Unfortunately, they were unable to locate any usable DNA on it because it had been tampered with. This was a significant setback. The police then sought to determine when the crime had occurred. One of the United States' leading forensic experts, Michael Baden, analyzed all the available information about the body. He concluded that the woman had likely died around 3:30 a.m. based on her body temperature and the amount of undigested food in her stomach. Therefore, when James arrived at work at 6:30 a.m., he would have definitely noticed that something was wrong. Police were skeptical of the idea of a botched robbery because nothing was taken. They questioned why the robbers would kill a woman who was sleeping and did not witness the robbery. This conflict led to the filing of murder charges. On November 8, 2019, James was arrested after being charged, but the 67-year-old did not confess to the crime. Police used the time of death to investigate a murder that had occurred 40 years earlier. They found evidence that a robbery had been staged. With this information, law enforcement and James presented their case to the jury, focusing on James' alleged involvement in the murder of Kathy Krausnack, his first wife. During the police, investigators discovered a dangerous criminal named Edla Rabbi, who lived about a mile and a half from Kathy's home in 1982. Rabbi was notorious for his harmful taste in women. Despite being arrested several times, Rabbi often received light sentences and served a total of more than 32 years in prison before his death in 2014. He confessed to killing Kathy but gave many inaccurate details, leading to skepticism about his claims. After each time in custody, he hunted for new victims, torturing them. His first confirmed murder occurred in 1991 when he strangled a 27-year-old woman named Stephanie Kupczynski. Although he confessed to the crime in 2012, he maintained that he had no intention of killing her and that the situation had spiraled out of control. Shortly before Kathy's murder, Rabbi had been released from prison in the 1980s. He was questioned and the investigation began but was not considered a likely suspect. Police questioned him briefly and then released him. As a result, James's lawyers claimed the police were negligent. Instead of pursuing the real killer, they chose to blame the grieving husband, James, who they considered the prime suspect. This situation had a significant impact on society. It was revealed that not only was the criminal dead by the time the case was revisited, but the police who investigated it in the 1980s were also deceased, meaning they could not be held accountable for any mistakes. During the original police, the police had only spoken to the murderer once and then disregarded him entirely. Since Edla Rabbi had passed away, he could not be questioned to clarify his role in the case. Nevertheless, many involved in the investigation still questioned whether he was connected to Kathy's murder. Although he confessed to killing Kathy before his death, numerous inconsistencies arose in his account, particularly regarding the handwriting, which did not resemble his at all. This conclusion was reached by all the experts who examined his case. First, he had a history of rape rather than robbery, yet no signs of sexual assault were found. Additionally, the murder weapon, an axe, was not typical of his methods, and the handwriting was evidently different. As a result, police did not consider him a suspect. Years ago, the prosecution was leaning towards the theory that Kathy's husband was her killer rather than a nearby maniac. During the trial, the prosecutor presented the time of death as crucial evidence. However, several defense experts disagreed with the assertion that Kathy died early, with most believing it occurred before 6:30 in the morning. It is believed that Kathy died at 6:30 a.m. after her husband left for work. The investigation was complicated by the fact that Kathy was under an electric blanket, and it was unclear whether it was on or off at the time of her death. If it was on, the temperature it reached was unknown. Experts attempted to estimate the time of death by analyzing the drop in body temperature. Ultimately, there is no reliable method for determining the exact time of death. Experts have differed, resulting in a margin of error of several hours. Another piece of evidence cited by the police was a shoe imprint found pressing down on a garbage bag at the crime scene. This imprint resembled the shoes worn by Kathy's husband, who was absent at the time of her death. However, this evidence alone was not enough to establish his guilt. The prosecutor argued that the husband was the only possible suspect because he had a motive stemming from family issues. After lengthy deliberations at the hearing, the verdict was announced in court. The jury were unanimous in only one opinion, that the crime was too confusing and contradictory, and the evidence too dubious and easily dismissed. Despite this, James Krausnack was convicted of second-degree murder in November 2022 and sentenced to 25 years in prison. The verdict came as a shock to many, especially to those close to James who knew him well. They had remained certain that James was not guilty because there was no serious evidence of his involvement. James himself also asserted his innocence. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Brianna Nugent. Brianna grew up in Hayden, Alabama, USA. Her friendly personality helped her make many friends. She doesn't care about boys at school. Instead, she devotes herself to her studies with the goal of becoming a nurse. After graduating high school, she enrolled in a nursing program at Wallace Community College. There, she met Stephen Nix, who was known to enjoy drinking and gambling. He was not concerned about having a stable job and often acted irresponsibly. Stephen worked as a cleaner at the medical center where Brianna was interning, and he seemed uninterested in improving his life. Despite their differences, they began dating, and at one point, Brianna moved into his house, where he lived with his parents. However, after a while, Stephen admitted to Brianna that he was having an affair with a coworker. This revelation shocked Brianna, leading her to end the relationship. She then focused on her studies and successfully earned her nursing degree. During the following year, Stephen repeatedly tried to reach out to her, pleading for another chance and promising he would never cheat again. Eventually, Brianna relented and agreed to give him another opportunity. They later got married and both started working to save money for their first home. The problem started when Stephen lost his job as a cleaner. He attempted to find another job but had difficulty maintaining any position for long. After several attempts, he eventually stopped looking for work altogether. His daily routine began to mirror that of a teenager. He spent his nights playing computer games and slept until the evening. Although Brianna had a good income, but Stephen, who was not contributing financially, took control of the family budget. Brianna had to ask him for every dollar she needed for basic necessities, often pleading with him for even essential items and food. However, Stephen didn't control his spending, so he ended up in debt of about $50,000. To address this issue, he persuaded Brianna to declare bankruptcy. At that point, he had such control over her that she felt she couldn't refuse. In 2019, they went through with this plan, and the debts were eliminated, but it took a big toll on Brianna, leaving her morally exhausted. The stress caused by Stephen led her to depression, requiring expensive medications. After a few months, she was offered a life insurance policy at work, which depended on her income as a nurse. When she brought it up to Stephen, he agreed it was a good idea. By February 2020, Stephen was still unemployed and was heavily reliant on Brianna. She started to suspect that he might betray her again and feared he was using illegal drugs. To protect herself, Brianna hid her medications from him, but he continued to control her finances and her life. She felt trapped in a toxic relationship and was unsure how to escape, fearing her parents would judge her for wasting time on someone unworthy. Ultimately, she only confided in a few close friends and her sister, sharing her intention to file for divorce. On March 2, 2020, around noon, Stephen called 911, claiming he found his wife, Brianna, unresponsive in the bathroom. The dispatchers instructed him to perform CPR, but throughout the call, he made no attempt to help his wife. Instead, he focused on telling his version of incident while ignoring their instructions. 5 minutes later, when paramedics arrived, a county sheriff's deputy and some of Stephen's family members were already present. It was unusual that an officer, who was supposed to be half an hour away from the incident, arrived even before the paramedics. The Stephen family lived far away, yet they arrived at his house very quickly. Soon after, Brianna's relatives also arrived. Stephen called his mother and sister at 12:20 p.m. after the ambulance had arrived. He informed them that Brianna had ended her life and said he had witnessed similar things in the past. His family was shocked and rushed to the house. The medics tried to revive Brianna, but it was too late. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was already cold, indicating that she had been dead for several hours. A syringe with an 18mm needle was found nearby, leading to speculation that Brianna may have died from an overdose of illegal drugs. Stephen explained that his wife's body had already cooled down when he found her. He said he was preparing to go outside when he heard a loud noise from the bathroom, which sounded like something had fallen. He dismissed it, thinking it was just mobile phone. After going shopping and returning about an hour later, he went upstairs and found his wife lifeless. Brianna's family rejected the idea that her death was due to an overdose. They frequently communicated with her and did not see any signs of substance abuse. As a nurse, Brianna was subject to random screenings for alcohol and illegal drugs at work, and her results were consistently negative. Her colleagues also expressed disbelief, stating they could not imagine her using anything harmful. When Brianna's relatives arrived, they observed that Stephen appeared calm and not overly concerned about the situation. He was even cleaning the bathroom. However, his demeanor changed dramatically, and he became nervous once police officers arrived. While the police were focused on investigating the crime scene, Stephen took a bag of collected garbage from the bathroom and threw it into his pickup truck instead of the trash bin. When the police requested access to Brianna's mobile phone, Stephen refused. However, her sister was able to unlock the phone and discovered that Stephen's last call to Brianna was made at 7:53, a time when he usually would still be asleep after a night of playing video games. When questioned by the police, Stephen claimed he had called her number just to tease her, but he did not explain the nature of the joke. Additionally, at 12:02, after calling 911, Stephen inexplicably sent a text message to Brianna. He could not explain why he would text someone who had already passed away. He also refused to allow the police to inspect his car. After learning that he had thrown the garbage bag away, the investigator had to return to the station to obtain a warrant. This inadvertently allowed Stephen time to get rid of the evidence. He quickly got rid of the garbage and erased any traces of his actions. The crime scene was thoroughly cleaned by the next day, when Brianna's relatives arrived to gather items for the burial. Brianna's sister was shocked to discover that Brianna didn't even own nice underwear. This seemed odd. It also shows that her husband does not allow her to spend any money on herself. The following day, Stephen called Brianna's sister, Brittany, and invited her to his home for a discussion. When she arrived, his relatives were already there. He showed her 2 empty bottles of opioid painkillers and a bag of syringes. Stephen claimed he found these items in a drawer of Brianna's belongings, suggesting she died from a drug overdose due to a long-standing addiction. However, this medication can only be prescribed by prescription, and it certainly does not belong to Brianna. Brittany was sure that Stephen was lying. After Brianna's death, Brittany and her mother went through Brianna's things and didn't find anything missing. They would have been aware if anything was gone. Then, Stephen showed Brittany another drawer that had Brianna's underwear in it. He claimed to have found more evidence there that Brittany and her mother had overlooked. At that point, Brittany started to think that Stephen might have been involved in Brianna's death, and she no longer wanted to listen to him. Brittany went to the funeral home to style her deceased younger sister's hair and makeup, Brianna, despite strong objections from Stephen's family. Upon arriving, she quickly realized why they were so concerned. She discovered her sister's body covered in numerous fresh bruises and over 80 injection marks, some new and others starting to heal. At the time of her death, Brianna was a certified nurse and knew how to administer injections properly. If she had a secret substance addiction, her level of bruising is also not normal. Additionally, some injection sites were located in where Brianna couldn't have reached herself without assistance. They also found signs of trauma on her palms, resembling defensive wounds. The condition of the needle marks indicated they were inflicted about 8 to 12 hours before her death. The nature of some injuries suggested that someone had restrained Brianna while administering the injections. This case cannot be considered end your own life, and it feels like the police are against Brianna. Brittany was able to take several photos of the Brianna body before being removed from the funeral home. She collected crucial evidence indicating that Brianna had died a tragic death. Brittany suspected that Brianna's husband, Stephen, was responsible. At Brianna's funeral, Stephen did not speak to anyone nor offer any greetings. He attempted to fake tears but ultimately had none, and many attendees noticed he appeared very unnatural. Several witnesses said Stephen bragged about connections that could help him evade justice, he even speaking with a mourner who turned out to be a police officer from another city, but he quickly ended the conversation when he realized this. At that time, no one was aware that the deputy sheriff who arrived at the scene before everyone else was related to Stephen. Brianna's sister discovered that this deputy was not included in the investigation records, despite having full access to the crime scene. In October 2020, an investigator contacted Brianna's family to inform them that she had been the victim of a crime. The investigator suggested that she may have been killed because she witnessed another crime and was killed as an unintended witness. However, this theory was never confirmed, and the investigation was eventually closed. Stephen continued to live in the home he shared with his late wife, Brianna. Just a few days after Brianna's death, Stephen's longtime mistress moved in with him. They even renamed Brianna's favorite dogs. He received $160,000 in life insurance money from Brianna's death. Stephen rarely left the house and continued to live a childish lifestyle, spending the insurance money on video games, pouring concrete in front of the house, buying expensive car parts, and acquiring weapons and gifts for his lover. Stephen showered lover with lavish gifts, including jewelry and ostrich leather boots. However, he was unable to afford a tombstone for Brianna's until 6 months later, and this only happened after her relatives pressured him to do so. Brianna's family was appalled by his actions from the start. They sought justice for her by filing complaints with the police and other authorities, but their efforts were in vain. The case was closed, labeled as an accident, and no investigation was conducted to gather evidence or identify suspects. Brianna's family continued to appeal to higher authorities, requesting that the police reopen the investigation, but they were told it was under the jurisdiction of a different police station. The Brianna's family is concerned that Stephen's connections are obstructing the investigation. Despite this, Brianna's sister remained persistent, and the case was reopened. Unfortunately, it was soon discovered that all the evidence had been lost, and no thorough examinations had been conducted during prior investigations. Stephen is still withholding crucial case information from Brianna's sister and mother. Although he claims that access to the medical report from the pathologist is restricted until an official conclusion is reached, this is misleading. He is aware of the report's contents, raising questions about his motives. Eventually, the Brianna's family hired a private detective who was able to uncover various materials. One significant find was video footage from a search of Stephen's car and home, which showed him smiling brightly while leaning over Brianna's lifeless body. Following the public revelation of this footage, Stephen became fearful and installed security cameras around the house. Meanwhile, Brianna's sister Brittany continues to search for evidence that proves Stephen was involved in her younger sister's death. Brittany sent a photo of a package of fentanyl to Brianna's co-workers, who firmly stated that the medicine package did not come from the hospital, as they had never seen such drugs before. It was later revealed that a different drug from another manufacturer was used at their workplace, which had different packaging. This contradicted Stephen's earlier claim that Brianna had become addicted to drugs at work. Moreover, an official request from a medical institution confirmed that Brianna could not have stolen the drugs, as their records were strictly monitored. The large needles found in Brianna's home were not typically used for such drugs, and Brianna, a nurse, was aware of this. Additionally, Brianna's family received a toxicology report about 4 months after her death. The report revealed that her body contained high levels of various psychotropic substances, including of antidepressants and fentanyl, almost double the lethal dose. The Brianna's family believes that Brianna, given her experience with medications, would not have made such a mistake or acted carelessly. When Brittany spoke to the medical examiner responsible for the autopsy and the cause of death determination, he mentioned that the conclusions in the autopsy report heavily relied on the circumstances surrounding the death. They reviewed reports from investigative agencies like the sheriff's office and the coroner's office. Brianna's death certificate states that the immediate cause of death was an overdose, and it categorizes her death as an accident. However, achieving justice remains difficult. The Brianna's family initiated a petition to raise public awareness, which could have helped with legal and social expenses. Unfortunately, they only raised $5,000 instead of the needed $20,000, leaving the majority of the financial burden on Brianna's family. The case is over. Justice has not been served. We will follow the new details of the case in the future. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Roxana Sikorsky. Lorraine and Jeffrey Sikorsky were a happy married couple, they living in a beautiful dream home in a prosperous small town in Michigan, which had a population of under 10,000. Lorraine worked as a nurse, while Jeffrey was an engineer. They have successful careers and good incomes, however, they feel deprived without children. Both Lorraine and Jeffrey deeply wanted to become parents. They often found themselves enviously watching their neighbors' children go to school, realizing that they were missing the joy of parenthood. In 2004, after careful consideration, they decided to adopt their child. However, they quickly realized that adoption was difficult and had many hurdles. In search of a solution, some friends suggested a simpler option: travel to Poland to adopt there. Then, they contacted an orphanage, received approval to adopt, and traveled to Poland to select a child. They even thought about adopting more than one child. Lorraine was particularly drawn to a 4-year-old girl named Roxana, she feeling a strong emotional bond with her. As they talked, Roxana began to call Lorraine Mom, which filled Lorraine with joy. Feel secure about your choice. Jeffrey also liked Roxana and supported the decision. Lorraine and Jeffrey discovered that Roxana had a younger brother and sister who lived in the same orphanage. The siblings had been removed from an unstable family and were very close to one another, with Roxana taking care of them as the oldest. Lorraine and Jeffrey decided to adopt all 3 children together so they wouldn't be separated. They believed it was important for the siblings to grow up together. Excited to return home, they envisioned their new life as a big, happy family filled with the sounds of children laughing. Their dream became a reality when they completed all the necessary paperwork and returned home with their 3 new children. Lorraine and Jeffrey's 3 adopted children quickly adapted and settled into their new life. Their children find studying English very easy. Jeffrey continued working, while Lorraine took a break from her job to care for the home and children. Then, children started school and had no difficulties with their studies. The family was attached and happy for 10 years, until Roxana entered her teenage years. In 2014, at 15, Roxana started having behavioral issues. She rebelled, spent all day playing computer games, do poorly in school, and stopped listening to her parents. Worried about Roxana's behavior, Lorraine and Jeffrey reached out to a psychologist for help. Roxana was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. She received medication and was later diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder, which stemmed from neglect and abuse in her childhood. This disorder affects a child's ability to form an emotional relationship with a foster parent and can lead to fear, hypervigilance, difficulty interacting with peers, and exhibit aggressive behavior towards self and others. Therapy had a positive impact on Roxana, helping her feel calmer. However, her life took a turn when a guy named Michael Angelo Rivera reached out to her on social media, claiming to be 18 years old. Roxana was thrilled to receive attention from him. Michael, a high school student who was 4 years older than Roxana, began chatting with she. He praised her, making her feel comfortable and special. She shared her story of being adopted and the difficulties she had faced, and Michael listened empathetically, making her feel understood. One day, Michael invited Roxana to meet him, and she accepted. She dyed her hair, got dressed, and headed to the library to meet him. Roxana was petite and weighed only 40 kilograms, which made her seem fragile. Michael was captivated by her. Their meeting went well, and from then on, they started seeing each other at the library every day. Her parents were unaware that she was talking to Michael. They believed she was only going to the library to study and that her meetings with Michael were just coincidental. Later on, it was revealed that Michael was actually 23 years old, not 18 years old like he said, making him 8 years older than Roxana. Despite this age difference, Roxana was so blindly in love with him that she didn't even realize it. This was her first love, and she was already fantasizing about marrying Michael to escape her parents' disapproval, hoping they could live happily together. Roxana had difficulty bonding with her adoptive parents because of her mental illness, reactive attachment disorder. Although her parents cared for her, but she quickly became more deeply attached to Michael. To outsiders, their relationship appeared unhealthy. Her friends warned her against dating Michael because he appeared much older, but Roxana dismissed their concerns, thinking they were just jealous since they didn't have boyfriends. As a result, Roxana started to pull away from her friends and family, spending all her time with Michael. She was often with him and rarely came home. Her parents, Lorraine and Jeffrey, noticed her changed behavior and eventually learned about her boyfriend. They were taken aback. To them, Michael seemed too mature, and they felt the age gap was inappropriate, fearing it could lead to negative outcomes. Lorraine and Jeffrey read their messages and recognized that their relationship was not healthy. Roxana's parents had a serious conversation with her, asked her to stop all contact with Michael. However, Roxana strongly opposed this request, telling her parents that she couldn't imagine her life without him, which alarmed them. In response, her parents took away her phone to prevent her from communicating with Michael and began to closely monitor her activities. Despite this, Roxana continued to find ways to reach out to him. Roxana's parents had a hard time reaching her, but she refused to listen. Michael started visiting their house at night, and Roxana would sneak out through the window to meet him. One night, the police discovered them in a car together and sent Roxana home. This situation had worsened, prompting Jeffrey and Lorraine to discuss taking drastic measures, as they suspected that Roxana and Michael were involved in a sexual relationship. Roxana's parents took her to meet the doctor for a checkup, and their worst fears were confirmed. Outraged, they decided to hold Michael responsible for corrupting their daughter. They collected DNA evidence so they could report him to the police. However, their plan failed when the police refused to accept the report, as Roxana claimed that everything had been consensual and that she was not raped. Although the police had seen Roxana and Michael in the car earlier, and they knew that Michael was much older than her, they took no action. Roxana's parents were very worried and did not want her to get involved with Michael. So they decided to take the case to court to protect their daughter from him. After Roxana learned of this, she begged her parents not to proceed, but they were resolute, leading to a tragic outcome. Michael was aware of Roxana's parents' intentions against him, which upset him. Both he and Roxana wanted to escape to a distant place, but they lacked the financial means to do so and feared Roxana's parents would search for them. Consequently, they devised a malicious plan to eliminate the obstacle posed by Roxana's family, believing it would allow them to be happy together. At around 2 a.m. on October 17, 2014, 15-years-old Roxana entered her 12-years-old younger brother's bedroom holding a knife. She approached his bed while he was asleep, covered his mouth with her hand, and began stabbing him in the throat. The boy screamed, and Roxana left him bleeding and went to her 11-years-old sister's room. Their parents rushed to help the boy and were horrified by what they saw. They looked into Roxana's room and found her standing by her bed with the knife. Roxana was frozen in place. Their father, Jeffrey, quickly grabbed her. Meanwhile, Michael, who had been waiting outside, was on the phone texting Roxana to check on her. As the parents called 911, Roxana seized the opportunity to jump out of the window and escape to meet Michael. Doctors arrived and assisted the injured boy, who was crying and covered in blood. Thankfully, he survived and made a full recovery. The police placed Roxana and Michael on the wanted list, and they were eventually arrested in Detroit at Michael's apartment, where they were planning their wedding. Roxana was charged with attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder, while Michael faced 7 charges, including conspiracy to commit murder. Turns out, Roxana and Michael devised a plan to eliminate her entire family. Roxana was supposed to kill her family members one by one, starting with her younger brother, then her sister, and finally her parents. Fortunately, the plan did not succeed. The night before the incident, Roxana and Michael were texting. During their conversation, Roxana began to panic and reconsidered her decision, realizing that these were her biological siblings, whom she had cared for in her childhood, and she loved her adoptive parents. Despite Roxana's change of heart, but Michael pressured her by saying that he was just there to make sure it happened. Under his influence, she took a knife and went to confront her younger brother. Due to Roxana being only 15 years old, there was a debate about how she should be tried. The prosecutor argued that the severity of the crime warranted treating her as an adult, and the judge concurred. Roxana was placed in a juvenile detention center but was later moved to a psychiatric clinic for treatment. Roxana's parents pleaded for leniency on her behalf. They preferred that she receive treatment in a clinic rather than face imprisonment. They held Michael responsible for the incident, claiming he manipulated Roxana and coerced her into committing these serious offenses. They believed she was unable to understand her actions due to her illness, which made her reliant on him. In court, Roxana apologized to her parents for not meeting their expectations and promised to do better. Her parents hired a skilled lawyer, spending $30,000 to help ensure their daughter remained free. However, after that, Roxana was assigned a public defender. The public defender advised her to accept a plea bargain with the prosecution to reduce her sentence, and she ultimately agreed. Roxana pleaded guilty only to assault with intent to murder and received a prison sentence of 10 to 20 years, with the possibility of parole in 2024. Roxana's parents think the sentence is unfair and too severe for their daughter, who they believe was influenced by Michael. They feel that Michael should face the harshest penalty. Lorraine, 54 years old, Roxana's mother, expressed to the press her urgent need for psychological support. She is concerned that her daughter is still at risk and that being in an adult prison could seriously damage her already vulnerable state. Lorraine also questioned how this sentence could truly help her daughter, arguing that it does not serve justice. Lorraine criticized the public defender, believing he was uninterested in protecting Roxana's interests. Instead of fighting for her, he made a deal that sent her to prison. The family was unaware that Roxana intended to make this deal. Had they known, they would have advised her against it. Lorraine is convinced that if there had been no deal, the jury would have found Roxana not guilty. Roxana's father, Jeffrey, who is 50 years old, was upset with the way the trial was conducted. He worried about Roxana's safety in prison, as she is still very young and vulnerable. Their concerns grew after Roxana threatened to harm herself, intensifying their fears about her future. The parents also blamed the police for not arresting Michael, who was found in a car with Roxana despite having an inappropriate relationship with her. They believed that if the police had taken appropriate action, Roxana's situation could have been prevented. The trial of Michael began, during which he blamed Roxana for everything. He claimed that it was her decision and plan, insisting he was not present at the crime scene and only supported her from outside. However, their correspondence contradicted his claims, showing that he was the one who directed her actions and masterminded the operation. As a result, Michael Angelo Rivera was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After listening to her parents, Roxana withdrew her guilty plea, blamed her defense attorney, and requested a new trial, but her request was denied. She is currently serving her sentence in the Women's Correctional Colony of Huron Valley. Since the attack, Roxana's siblings have undergone significant changes. They experienced severe psychological trauma and needed rehabilitation. For a long time, they were unable to sleep in their own rooms and suffered from nightmares. Thankfully, their mother reports that their lives have recently improved, and the children are now looking forward to Roxana's return home. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jennifer Ertman v. Elizabeth Pena. Jennifer Ertman was born on August 15, 1978, and Elizabeth Pena was born on June 21, 1977. They live in Houston, Texas, and are both high school students. They have been best friends since childhood, sharing a strong bond. Elizabeth's father later commented that Jennifer was a wonderful person, with her positive, caring, and intelligent nature. Both girls had high expectations for them from their parents. They loved fashion, enjoyed jewelry and makeup, and were active, often playing basketball together. Jennifer and Elizabeth enjoyed a vibrant teenage life filled with friends, goals, and dreams. They spent all their free time together, hanging out with the same groups and attending the same parties. On June 24, 1993, they were headed to a pool party at the home of their friend Gina, as they often did. The two girls planned to meet at Elizabeth's house. Elizabeth was 16 years old, while Jennifer was 14. Jennifer's father, Randy, drove her to Elizabeth's house around 4:45 p.m. They dressed up together in preparation for the party before making their way to Gina's. Elizabeth's mother drove the girls to the party at 8 p.m. Their curfew was 11:30 p.m. They were responsible teenagers who respected this rule and planned to be home on time that night, having promised their parents that they would not be late. However, as the evening progressed, Jennifer and Elizabeth became so engrossed in their fun that they lost track of time. By 2 a.m., they realized they would be late for curfew and hurried out of Gina's house. The girls had two ways to get home. The first option was to take their usual route, which went through a busy street. Although it was late, this was the safest choice, even though it took longer. The second option was to cut through the local park and walk along the train tracks, which would save them 10 to 15 minutes. At that time, cell phones were not common. The girls did not have phones, so they could not contact their families to let them know they were on their way home. In addition, people were generally less aware of crime at that time. The girls and their parents did not think about the dangers. People often left their doors unlocked because they trusted each other. Without considering the risks, the Elizabeth, Jennifer chose the shorter route to get home faster. This meant walking through dark park alleys and crossing the railway embankment before reaching Elizabeth's house. Unfortunately, this decision had tragic consequences. Jennifer's mother woke up around 4 a.m. and noticed that the light in her daughter's bedroom was still on, which was unusual because Jennifer always turned it off at night. Concerned, she checked Jennifer's room and found it empty, which worried her even more. To avoid causing panic, she tried calling the parents of Jennifer's best friend, Elizabeth, thinking that Jennifer might have spent the night there. Unfortunately, she couldn't reach them. Concerned about their daughter, Jennifer's parents tried to contact Gina, where the girls had stayed the night before, to see if they had stayed overnight at her house. However, they were unable to contact her either as no one answered the phone at Gina's house. They decided to start looking for the girls. First, they went to Elizabeth's house, but no one answered the door. Then Jennifer's father went to Gina's house and talked to her. He was surprised to find that the girls were not there either. Gina told him that Jennifer and Elizabeth had left her house around 2 a.m. and she had not seen them since. The man returned to Elizabeth's house and discovered that her parents had not seen her since the evening. In a state of panic, the family called 911 to report both girls missing. In response, the police immediately began searching for the two girls, as they had gone missing after dark and no one knew where they were. The idea that the girls might have run away was not considered. All their belongings and money were still at home, and they had no reason to make such a drastic choice. Both girls came from good families. The parents wasted no time. They not only searched for their daughters but also printed flyers with their photos to distribute throughout the city. Family members canvassed the area, asking anyone they met if they had seen the two girls out at night. Unfortunately, no one had noticed anything unusual for 4 days. There was a tense silence, and no progress was. The police received some tips, but these did not lead anywhere. The crucial 48-hour window had passed, despite the family's hopes for the safe return of their daughters. Police feared the worst. On the 4th day after the teenagers' disappearance, the police station received a troubling call. An anonymous caller claimed that the bodies of Jennifer and Elizabeth were in a clearing in the forest behind the park where they had taken a shortcut. The police quickly arrived on the scene and began searching the area as the exact location was unclear. They crossed a railway embankment and from a distance spotted suspicious objects in a small clearing surrounded by trees. As they approached, they were horrified to discover that the objects were two bodies, lying side by side. Both bodies were lying on their backs, naked, and had decomposed significantly due to the summer heat. The condition of the victims made identification very difficult. The ground was covered with numerous fresh footprints, indicating that several people were involved. There were signs of dragging and a struggle, but the police underestimated the brutality of the situation and the horrors the girls endured in their final moments. They reached out to the media to share the grim discovery. At that moment, Jennifer's father was giving another interview, appealing to the public for help, when he overheard the shocking news. While authorities worked to identify the bodies, the grieving father quickly drove to the park where the crime occurred. Overcome with grief, he tried to push through police lines. believing his daughter was among the victims. Officers struggled to restrain him when he demanded to know the victim's hair color. However, officers were unable to provide any information. The bodies were badly decomposed, making identification impossible, but they feared they could be Jennifer and Elizabeth. All the evidence collected was submitted to the medical examiner's office, and the bodies were examined by forensic experts. They determined that the deceased were 18-year-old Jennifer Ertman and 18-year-old Elizabeth Pena. The identification was made using dental records, as heat and insects had caused extensive decomposition within just 4 days. Multiple prints were found at the crime scene, and police determined that the prints belonged to several people. The exact number was difficult to determine because the prints were mixed up. A detailed analysis during the autopsy revealed that both teenagers died from strangulation. At that time, DNA testing was not commonly used, and there was no existing database for comparisons. Additionally, an anonymous witness who had helped locate the bodies appeared to have more information that could be vital for the investigation. The police tracked down the address from which the call was made and promptly went to speak with the informant to advance the investigation. The police arrived at the home of brothers Joe and Peter Cantu, finding only Joe there. He quickly confessed to being the anonymous informant who had called the police. Joe disclosed that his brother Peter and 5 of his friends had violently attacked 2 schoolgirls. The officers conducted a search of the house and discovered several pieces of jewelry that clearly belonged to females. Victims' relatives later confirmed that the jewelry belonged to Elizabeth and Jennifer. They also found traces of DNA belonging to the girls on the items. Based on Joe's information, police were able to piece together the events of the violent incident. Elizabeth and Jennifer were walking through the park after 2 a.m. when they were approached by several members of the gang. The gang ranged in age from 14 to 18, including the oldest members, Jose Medellin, Derek Sean O'Brien, Efren Perez, Venancio Medellin, and Peter Cantu, 18, along with Raul Villarreal, 17, who had just completed his gang initiation. As the 2 girls walked silently without stopping, Elizabeth was a few steps ahead of Jennifer as they headed towards their destination, just over a kilometer away. Suddenly, Jose Medellin appeared from the shadows. He tried to grab Elizabeth, but she quickly dodged and sped up. However, he was determined and caught up to her, grabbing her by the neck and dragging her towards where his friends were gathered. At that moment, Elizabeth was left alone in the dark park. Hearing Elizabeth's screams, Jennifer decided to help her. This was a grave mistake, as she was unable to escape and call the police in time. Jennifer ran after Elizabeth and fell into the hands of a dangerous group. Jennifer probably underestimated the situation and did not realize that Jose was part of a group of 6. She was caught and thrown to the ground next to Elizabeth, and then the group of criminals forced both girls to strip and attack them together for an hour. Forensic experts discovered that the schoolgirls fought back fiercely despite the terrifying situation. They scratched, bit, and kicked their attackers. Later, police found evidence of the girls' resistance, including bite marks and scratches on the assailants. Unfortunately, this bravery did not save them. After the brutal assault, the gang leader, 18-year-old Peter Cantu, decided not to let the schoolgirls go, fearing they would identify him and report him to the police. He ordered the others to kill Elizabeth and Jennifer. One gang member, Raul, forced Jennifer to kneel. Exhausted, she complied, and he and Derek placed a red belt around her neck. They strangled her with all their strength until the belt broke, and she stopped moving. Unsatisfied, they continued to strangle her with shoelaces to ensure she was dead. Elizabeth was forced to witness this horrific scene and realized her own fate was sealed. Desperate, she pleaded with her attackers to let her go, promising not to report them. However, the criminals remained unyielding. The exhausted and injured girl couldn't run far before her attackers caught her and threw her to the ground. They began kicking her, causing several broken ribs and knocked out teeth. After Peter, Jose, and Derek strangled her with shoelaces, they stepped on the throats of both girls to make sure they couldn't survive. The gang then took the jewelry and money from their bodies. After the attack, the gang members, except for Derek, went to Peter Cantu's house, where his younger brother Joe and his wife, Christina, were present. Christina noticed that the boys returned late at night with blood on their clothes. They appeared tired and nervous, as if they had just been in a fight. When she asked what had happened, the gang members claimed they were just having some fun. Yet, they did not hide their actions. Instead, they recounted the details of the incident to Joe and Christina with a sense of pride, even laughing about it. Jose remarked that if he had a gun, it would have been easier. Joe and his wife were not pleased with the story. However, they chose to handle the situation carefully to avoid escalating tensions. Instead of arguing or making accusations, they listened intently to ensure that the criminals were being truthful. After the gang members split the stolen goods and left, Joe and Christina left alone. Christina shared her anger and fear with her husband over the incident. Having been a victim of gang rape in her youth, the story had a profound impact on her. Christina convinced her husband Joe that they needed to report the criminals to prevent them from committing more crimes. Joe was initially hesitant because he did not want to betray his brother to the police. He was also worried that the rest of the gang would retaliate against them. However, Christina reassured him that he could remain anonymous when contacting the police, which would help protect their identities. On the fourth day after the girls went missing, thanks to Joe's information, the girls' bodies were discovered. Joe informed the police about the case, which confirmed his testimony. Peter took the victim's jewelry and other valuables, including a ring with the letter E that belonged to Elizabeth. In a misguided move, Jose intended to give the ring to his girlfriend, unaware of the seriousness of the situation and how inappropriate the gift was. In addition, the police found a torn red belt in the brothers' home, which matched the only weapon found near the victims' bodies, which was determined to be the murder weapon. On June 29, 1993, police arrested all 6 individuals involved in the brutal murder. When the police approached Derek, Beffron attempted to flee through the back door but was quickly apprehended as he was surrounded. He was charged with double murder with aggravating circumstances. During his arrest, Derek asked if his detention was related to the 2 girls, which led the officers to confirm their initial tip was accurate. At the police station, Derek confessed that he had given Jose the red belt used to strangle Jennifer and mentioned he had kept a piece of the belt for himself. The police also discovered DNA evidence of the murdered girl in their house. Raul, who had joined the gang the night of the murder, was similarly arrested. With substantial evidence, along with the testimonies from the suspects and informants, they were all charged with double murder, rape, and torture. During the hearing, each person involved in the crime was carefully evaluated. The victim's family endured the painful details of the horrific act as they sought the maximum punishment possible under Texas law. Jennifer's father later recounted that when he arrived at the crime scene and discovered the girls' bodies, he saw Derek smile at him, wave, and then walk away. At the time, overwhelmed with panic and shock, he didn't think much of it. Only later did he realize Derek was taunting him about losing his only daughter. Everyone agreed on the guilt of the defendants. As a result, 5 out of the 6 were sentenced to death. The only one who avoided the death penalty was Venancio Medellin. At just 14 years old, he cooperated with the investigation and testified against the other perpetrators, including his brother Jose. Being a minor, Venancio was convicted differently from the others, who were tried as adults. He received a 40-year prison sentence, meaning he could be released when he turns 54. At the end of the trial, another murder surfaced that the accused might have committed. Authorities were informed about dismembered remains, implicating Derek and Efren in the unsolved murder of a girl named Patricia Lopez, who had been raped and tortured to death. Patricia's body was discovered 6 months before the massacre of Jennifer and Elizabeth, also near the forest. The nature of her murder was similar. Police found that 2 attackers had brutally beaten, raped, and mutilated her before disposing of her body. DNA from the victim was collected and analyzed, but the investigation initially failed to identify the culprits due to a lack of matches in the database. However, upon re-examination, male DNA found at the crime scene matched Jose's. Additionally, a beer can was discovered, and Derek's fingerprint was found on it. Despite this evidence, he was never charged with Patricia's murder. Derek later gave a recorded confession, admitting he was present during Patricia's murder but claimed he was too drunk to comprehend the situation and insisted he did not participate in her torture. The police did not have enough evidence to charge him with the massacre, which was considered unnecessary given the severity of the double murder for which he had already received a death sentence. During the trial, much of the questioning focused on the culpability of Raul Villarreal, who had joined the gang that night. Raul's attorneys urged the jury not to compare him to gang leader Peter Cantu in terms of culpability. However, the defense convincingly demonstrated that he did not participate in the madness. He was, however, present at the scene of the crime and did not stop anyone or leave. This case marked a significant moment in the U.S. judicial system, as it was the first time defendants were sentenced to death for such crimes. The shocking nature of the events received extensive media coverage and instilled fear in the local community, prompting many to avoid the area. The families of Elizabeth and Jennifer attended every trial and execution of the criminals involved. Derek, one of the defendants, was executed in July 2006. He was the only one to express remorse before his execution, apologizing to the victims' families and calling it the worst mistake of his life. Jennifer's father, Randy, remained steadfast despite Derek's remorse. Many opponents of the death penalty, including the wealthy, argue that lethal injection is a cruel punishment. However, the victims' parents disagree. Randy expressed his grief after testifying about the torment his daughter endured and her tragic death. Just before Derek's execution, Randy boldly stated that he wished Derek the same pain that Jennifer had gone through. Jose Medellin's execution also sparked international debate. As a Mexican citizen, Jose did not contact his consulate for protection before his trial, despite having that right under the Vienna Convention. That year, the U.S. opted out of mandatory jurisdiction, but Mexico still filed a lawsuit against the U.S. The International Court of Justice ordered a hearing to assess whether Jose's lack of consular support negatively impacted his defense. This situation received significant media attention and involved human rights organizations, which heightened its complexity. In 2005, then-President George W. Bush ordered hearings on the matter. However, the governor of Texas resisted this order and took the case to the U.S. Supreme Court, which decided that only the U.S. Congress has the authority to make decisions in such cases. In July 2005, the International Court of Justice intervened by halting Jose's execution and calling for a hearing with the consulate. Despite this, the governor of Texas insisted that they were not obligated to follow the International Court's decision. Opponents of the death penalty protested against the upcoming execution. However, the families of the victims insisted that lethal injection was appropriate for such a brutal crime. It is difficult to believe that the perpetrator was still in prison, and many wondered how the situation would resolve. He likely hoped for a pardon before his execution. On August 5, 2008, the Supreme Court dismissed his final appeal. In the moments leading up to the execution, the governor of Texas decided not to postpone it, despite requests from Mexico and Washington. Jose Medellin was executed 2 years after Derek's death. On August 17, 2010, the Peter Cantu made a final statement before his execution. Following this, the victims' parents expressed their satisfaction with the court's decision and the execution. They also hoped that the other participants in the horrific crime, who avoided lethal injection, would spend their lives in prison while awaiting their sentences. The Supreme Court enacted a law banning the execution of minors, which led to Raul Vellier receiving a life sentence, with the possibility of parole in 2029. This tragedy had a profound effect on the entire Houston community. It reminded residents of the ongoing issue of gang violence, similar to past struggles. To honor the memory of the Jennifer and Elizabeth, a memorial was established at the site of the horrific initiation, and another memorial was placed at their school. Randy believed that, regardless of their age, juvenile offenders who committed such heinous acts should never be released. Randy frequently spoke to the media, vowing to fight tirelessly to prevent the release of anyone involved in this brutal crime. He dedicated his life to this cause and remained committed to his promise. Sadly, Randy passed away from lung cancer in 2014 at the age of 61. His efforts significantly influenced the protection of victims' rights, leading to changes in legislation. Thanks to Randy's relentless advocacy, the families of the victims gained more rights in the courtroom. During hearings, Randy was open about his feelings and showed clear hostility towards criminals. His actions drew both support and criticism. Victim families were not allowed to speak in court to share their feelings. However, after this incident, the system became more lenient. In addition, it was forbidden to attend the executions of murderers. Nevertheless, Randy managed to eliminate this restriction, and it was precisely thanks to his persistence that the families of the victims were present at all the lethal injections. He believed this allowed the world to be made a little better. The remaining gang members in prison continue to request parole, hoping for eventual release. Their most recent application was denied.